Fellow sickos, I am Death Valley coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It's 2025 NBA trade deadline big board time. I pitched Grant on this idea only for him to inform me that Sam Vecini of The Athletic also made one. So we did not, I guess we cribbed it from him, but I cribbed it unknowingly, at least. That's the case that I'll plead. Mr. Hughes, before we get started, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well. I did. We talked before we started recording, just fresh off a robust Discord discussion that I was really enjoying. And I did note in there that I had to leave because I had to go talk about trades with some sicko, and that was appreciated too. We'll talk about that later. Some of the top. Hopefully, I don't think it's going to be a stale topic because it seems like it's been a big one all season, or at least a couple of them. But kind of energized by that. So. Excited to talk about that towards the end of this, and also excited to get organized with trade season that's fully here and seems like it sort of has been for a while. And kind of, I don't know, I like to sort of get ducks in a row trade wise before everything goes to, gets a little too chaotic. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
Yeah. And this season,
how are you? Sorry. How are you?
I'm great. I'm the same as you, although maybe still a little bit healthier. It sounds like
probably so.
I'm with you, but this year I know that some of the apron limitations were in place already, but this is the first year where everything's kind of in play. And so that makes prep even more important. But then you also kind of have to balance where it stresses me out because I feel not out of my element, but I'm used to just being so much more. I don't need as much prep when thinking about which team can do what as I will this year. And then you also have to resist the impulse to explain everything, because quite frankly, I think we've seen our audience doesn't necessarily the sickos in Discord, go join it. And there are people who care about this, but the minutia of getting into it, I don't expect most of our listeners to care about it. And so the impetus I have to explain all this stuff that I'm trying to figure out behind the scenes, I've gotten better at resisting it, believe it or not, even though I go on tangents all the time. But that's something I'm struggling with even more this year.
It's funny, trade talks and that whole side of covering the league has for a long time now, we joke about it, how it's just that's what gets traffic, that's what people want to talk about. And it's I think outside of a small subsection of people, it's not because they're interested in how do you match salary and what are the rules. It's just my player needs this, what players out there could I get? That's fun. It's the 2K-ification of the league. And so now when you talk about these trades, it's just you have to ignore, I think, if you want to keep it in the realm of what people are interested in about trades, you have to just you should get a counter on how many times you're allowed to say second apron or aggregate or whatever, because I don't think people care about that. It sucks that though, that is just part of it now. And so I think we should make a pledge to try to not get into the weeds too much and try to stay more focused on, to the extent that's even going to be possible, we'll see, on just the what people actually enjoy about talking about trade stuff. It's just let's get this guy there and see what happens. That's fun, right? You got to kind of stick to that stuff.
I hate being the bearer news though, where you do see people post trades and ask you about it. It's no, Milwaukee can't trade two players at once. I'm sorry.
That's 99%. I mean, the fake trade economy is in a weird spot right now, because almost all of them that you see out there are just yeah, that's not legal. That literally cannot happen. Thanks, new CBA.
Do you want to describe to the kids, the impressionable youths listening and watching, how we approached our NBA trade deadline big board?
So it's not necessarily a ranking of the best players. It comes fairly close to that, because I think, and you can amend this however you like or add to it, but it's really just they're here one based on, so you're not here if there's not a decent volume with solid credibility of you being in rumors or speculation or whatever. It's the names that we've probably heard swirling around most that aren't just pulled out of thin air. It's and hopefully there won't be any surprises here to the listeners and viewers. These are names you've come across.
I included a few bombs in here just to see why is LeBron ranked at number 27?
Well, and we'll also at some point later do hey, why aren't these guys, not on this edition, but why aren't these guys on a big board? It's just they haven't been really discussed. We think maybe they should be. And then if you've made the board, I think the quick and dirty way to describe the ranking system is just what would you fetch on the market? What kinds of offers are we hearing discussed? What's your value? So and that even really has some, it's not that simple because like, well, there's picks involved for some guys and there's salaries for others, and it's just like, what's the return package look like? And hopefully we've got this organized in a way that is pretty close to like biggest return package at the top, descending order going down. Because that's going to price in all the things you'd normally think about, which are how old is this player? How long is he under contract? What's his contract relative to his production? Like all that stuff, right? So that I think are the two kind of sets of ranking criteria we have here.
The only thing I would add to is we did exclude. I would say we looked at this through or tried for the most part. There's like a standalone value lens where it's all these players are not. I'll use the Pacers as an example. There's been speculation about Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker. I don't believe that the Pacers, though, would just trade those guys to get picks back. Like you're trading those guys as part of a larger consolidation move so they don't make our trade deadline big board because you're not. I hate using the verbiage of selling people, but you're not auctioning off this player. These are mostly populated by teams that are looking to sell or contract situations maybe that have forced hands.
Yeah, right. I think that's a good distinction to make.
And with that, let's get started. Standard big board rules apply. Is it standard? I guess people have a top 50 big board. We just went 30 deep. I will alternate, I guess, the reveals and moving on. So I'll just begin it at number 1. I don't think this will be debatable, Mr. Hughes, but we are going with Jimmy Butler, hair color watch.
Which, by the way, like, I mean, I don't know. Did you take the changing hair color thing as anything but like pretty classic Jimmy trolling, or is there like, I want out and this is the team I'm choosing?
So it would have, if he did it purple, it would have made more sense. But because it's orange, I know orange isn't necessarily a primary heat color, but like that yellow that they have, it can look kind of orange.
Okay.
And so I just didn't, I thought, but it's also Jimmy. So we've seen him use his appearance to send messages and troll people before.
Yeah.
So I understand it. But if he really wanted to stir up discussion, like Dallas Mavericks blue or something in his hair.
He did do blue for a minute though. Before orange, there was blue. Yeah, for like a day. It wasn't when when you're searching for photos to put in articles like the Getty stuff or whatever. There's some blue in there. So I don't know, man.
I didn't see the blue. I saw the orange. Well, then that's the way to send it. But then he should have, because orange had to be of his list of teams. The Suns. He should have done it purple then if he was.
I mean, the problem
maybe
is
he didn't want to get Kings fans' hopes up. Perhaps
that's the problem. Is so many teams have so many different jerseys now. Like almost any color you chose could be like, oh well, the Suns City Edition alternates from 2021 were blue, so that must
He said he wants to go to the Thunder too. That's how we should have taken the orange, right?
Thunder could do it.
Any debate here though?
I mean, well, you want to put up number 2? Because that's the only debate I could really think about between. So Jimmy Butler's 1. I think he, first of all, before we do that, you're right to have him 1. His name has been the most discussed recently. Like he's the only guy where we've gotten here's the list of teams he might want to go to at this level of the big board. So like that warrants being number 1. And then the only debate is really like, is the package that Miami can get for him being on essentially an expiring contract that we should talk about too. Like, the Ingram's deals have been scuttled because people don't want to pay his next deal. You're signing up for that with Butler too. It's not as long because the over 38 rule, but per year, you're probably talking more than you're going to be giving Ingram wherever he signs next. So that's a factor. He's said he's going to hit free agency. That's another factor. So you might just be renting. I'm still inclined to think this is the biggest, like what we see sent out for Butler eventually, assuming he gets traded, will probably be a bigger package than anybody else sends out for anyone else, right?
I would say yes, just unless there's a name like Anthony Davis ambling onto the trade market that we haven't seen yet. But it is fascinating because he's 35 and the contract situation, but he's still, if you compare him to Brandon Ingram, who, spoiler alert, is not next, and like Brandon Ingram's been on the trade block for, it feels like, roughly forever,
right?
Or at least theoretically on the trade block forever. He's the most bankable option, even of when you're looking at some of the cheaper, higher end players. Yeah, other teams might, if you don't want to go all in, you're going to prefer looking at someone with a middle end salary who maybe plays the wing and hits threes, and that's it. But he is, when you just look at his playoff track record too, I know he's older. I know he's going to hit free agency. That was, like, to mention the contract. So his player options $52.4 million this summer. I'm assuming he won't, like, I guess because the deal is so short, has to be so short, he might end up getting max money, but like you're probably looking at least $40 million a year for him, right?
I would assume so. And this is maybe another thing we didn't really talk about. Uh, Would you say that Ingram or Levine or Butler have like a broader number of teams that would realistically trade for them? Because often that's a factor in like driving up market value, is you just have like the number of bidders or number of interested parties might make offers higher. Because I mean, Butler should not have appeal to like a large swath of the league because of his
Right.
age, because of the cost. Like if you're in the middle and you think he puts you over the top, then you're interested. But like rebuilders, no, this nonsense about like he's interested in signing with Brooklyn or something that was out there. Like, no, like why do the Nets have any interest in that? Let alone like they have the most cap space. They don't probably have enough to sign him to begin with. So like, how do you weigh that? Like, because I do think like even someone like Ingram just makes more sense on a Utah, for example, than Butler does. So is there a case that Butler should be lower for that reason? Or do we stick
I
to
would
the
say
size of the offer?
I would say in some instances that matters. This isn't one of them. And
Mhm.
I actually think in a lot of instances it takes one team.
Yeah.
And so what's more likely that one team's going to go in all in on Jimmy Butler or Brandon Ingram?
Yeah.
And the
Right.
answer to
Fair.
me would be pretty clearly Jimmy Butler. And
Mhm.
so I get it, but like Brandon Ingram specifically is tough because that dude is just I also you have to weigh the scalability of the fit too, which I think factors into the demand that you're talking about, where Jimmy, I think we tend to conflate scalability with shooting, which is,
Right.
there's a relationship there, but like Jimmy is not a high volume shooter, but like he can fit
Mhm.
probably anywhere. I would like he doesn't need to be in your traditional pick and roll offense. He doesn't need to be on the ball all the time. And like, his offensive performance doesn't normally inform his defensive efforts. So I think that's also what makes him super appealing. Whereas with Brandon Ingram, and we'll get to him. He's coming up, and but like, how many teams do you think Brandon Ingram can realistically fit on without having to have said team retailer so much of what it's
Yeah.
doing?
That's a great point. Like we really do. Oh, Brandon Ingram, better shooter. So therefore, he fits in more places. And then Butler is just the exception to that rule because he's not taking anything off the table if he's not on the ball
Right.
looking to get his own, right? Like he's a cutter defense, like spaces enough when the games matter. We've talked about that all the time. You mentioned his playoff 3-point shooting. Like I think usually it's not far off the mark to focus on like, well, can this guy space the floor if he's off the ball? If yes, he's scalable. Like that's usually a pretty good shorthand, but that's not how this works for these particular guys.
I think number one's inarguable to me. I think we're about to get into an interesting portion.
Okay.
If you want to take us to number two,
Yeah, Zach Levine's at number 2. I think now, and it's easy to say because he's playing really well. The market, it like if you look at where we were, which is Bobby Marks saying the market is what I mean, we always, how many times we joked about this? Like, I don't think Bobby Marks said it. It might have been Woj back in the day saying the market's barren. Bobby Marks talking about the Bulls needing to give up first to get off of Zach Levine. It's to the point now where 2 years and 95 left. That's a lot. That's superstar money. I don't know if Levine, I do know Levine is not like a number one option superstar on a good team.
Mhm.
He is exceptionally scalable because of his shooting and his on the move shooting. I don't think that price is as onerous as it seems. It's worse now in the various hard capping and apron environments than it used to be. But I do think the Bulls should be able to get it, like in a vacuum. Certainly they should be able to get a first for him and like not bad salary, which is very different from where we were. I will concede it's still harder if we're talking about the specific circumstances of the league right now, where the teams just are terrified to spend too much and like the fits just aren't great salary wise. But I actually, I actually feel very good about him being second. And I was going to say, like, is there a case for him over Butler? I just don't. If you're imagining the offers out there, I don't think Levine's going to get as much as Butler will. But I mean, is he the safer investment potentially? Just because you
Ooh.
have 2 guaranteed years like that, that's not nothing with Butler potentially just leaving wherever he lands.
And is there also, this is certainly an argument for him over Brandon Ingram, of course, but who do you trust? This is a form of scalability. It's not the entire thing, to be clear. But who do you who do you have more confidence in that their game or they could be impactful when they're scaled down?
Yeah.
Would it be Butler on offense specifically? Would it be Butler or Levine?
I think probably still Butler, but
Yeah.
Butler's just a cut above. Like he's in a separate level, at least right now. The age is another factor. Levine looks healthy. He's missed very few games this year. So like Butler could break down. Or, and by the way, this is why part of the reason the Heat are where they are with Butler is because of his durability, which, has been an issue. Levine hasn't been an Iron Man, but like he's healthy now and is younger. So I don't know. I think it's still Butler, but maybe the question is Levine or Ingram. Like, who do you like better as a scaled down threat there?
I think it's Levine by far, because
Okay.
what does Brandon Ingram do without the ball
Right.
in his hands? And the other thing is, I don't know if this is spicy, but like Zach LaVine is probably a better one-on-one defender than Brandon Ingram. I
Ooh.
think there's always the off-ball stuff with Zach LaVine, but if you go, you can watch. I mean, the Bulls' defense is awful, but like Zach LaVine is also playing, I wouldn't say out of position, but like he's a guard. He's not someone that I view on certain teams. Yeah, he can scale up to the wings, but the Bulls are not one of those teams. There's always going to be the off-ball lapses with him, but if you start even to dig into the numbers after watching, he's navigating screens better than he has in a couple of years, and just the individual defense, insofar as you're able to lock in on those, it hasn't been terrible.
Mhm.
And I would just argue that I don't think what does Brandon Ingram give you defensively right now?
It's kind of theoretical, right? Because he's got the length. He could be disruptive somehow. But it just really hasn't happened. I think maybe the edge Ingram has, although it probably comes with caveats, is he is a better passer and has better facilitation numbers than Levine does. Because Levine, is in the 4 assists per game range, has been there several times, but it's like we always knock him, and I think fairly, for being like he's going to make the one read pass. And I think Ingram might be a little better at just like mapping the floor, seeing the pass before the pass type thing. But that's really not what either of these guys. That's not the skill any team is like really focusing on if you're trading for either of these guys. Just a small thing.
No, and I think the bigger thing for Levine, of course, it's the offense, but it's like the dynamic shot making of he gives you more rim pressure than Brandon Ingram at this point. So if you put him on a team with, I mean, like with supercharged spacing or something,
Yeah.
or someone who else is like if you put him on the Nuggets, which has been a team, I think the fit is questionable going from him and Michael Porter Jr. when you're talking about what does that impact have on the defense, your size in general. But like him being able to get to the basket, he does that better than MPJ. But he also just the self-created shots. I mean, he's shooting his effective field goal percentage on self-created jumpers is 57.4. And among the 59 players that have taken at least 100 of those looks, he's fifth in efficiency. That is absurd.
He's a throwback like slasher, right? On a good team where it's like the ball gets swung to him because he's not your number one option, and he's going to hit that three, or everyone's freaked out about him hitting the three, so they close out hard, and he's dunking in a half a set. Like that's really, it almost feels like we haven't seen the best version of Zach LaVine, because it's almost, and maybe this is his fault for wanting to be something else, but doesn't it seem like he really would excel just as a luxury second, third option who's just like feasting on defensive attention, being somewhere else like that? That really feels like the best version of him to me.
Who is the best number one or teammate he's ever played with? Is it still Towns?
That's been so long. Like he did overlap with Towns. Yeah. Cause Towns has been in the league longer than you think. I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, if you think Towns is better than DeRozan, it's probably Towns. Who else are we even thinking about? I think that's kind of it.
Right. And I guess the argument would be, okay, so he's been in Chicago, like when DeRozan was there, he's been someone who's been a number two, technically.
I mean, DeRozan is a weird guy to play with, like as a number one.
That's the thing. So we just really haven't seen, and he's certainly never been in a situation where he can be on the floor and for extended stretches be the number three.
No,
because that in Denver, you could argue that would happen, and on other teams, you could argue that would happen. And by the way, relative to Ingram, don't you value that he still has that extra year left on his deal? Whereas do you prefer, yes, okay, he might be overpaid, but it's 2 more years after this one versus, well, now we got to figure out what to pay and for how long to pay Brandon Ingram after this season.
I think so. Although, like, I think so. The concern would be we're in exactly the same place next year, where a 45 million, I think he's 48 next year, on the last year of his deal, where that's just because of the aprons and all the cap environment and all these teams just being stuck and immobile and inflexible, where that number is just like, oh my God, do we have to pay to get off this now still? I don't think that's the case. I value the security because with Ingram, with Butler, even, although you would imagine that in either case, wherever they go, been discussions about here's what
Sure.
we're willing to do. Are we good with that? And the rental risk isn't as big as maybe it seems. I still value I have control. Like this is
Yeah.
not an asset that I risk losing for nothing. I don't know. That's just
And
me being risk averse.
and also, if he's gonna opt out, it either means that he played so well that maybe you don't kickers that final year is a player option, or traditionally when that happens, maybe it's because that number is actually going to come down because he's agreeing to re-sign on a longer deal for a
Yeah.
smaller number.
Yeah. I,
Uh,
I just like the extra year.
by the way, the team that I really want to see get Zach LaVine now, I want him on the Pistons. Like Tim
Yeah.
Hardaway Jr., Fontecchio, and Jaden Ivey for LaVine. Let's call it in.
Well, he's just the ultra like premium version of the Beasleys and the Hardaways and the guys they've tried to stick around that core.
But he might be able to lead because the offense has been so bad. It hasn't been great with Cade and Jaden when Ivy's healthy. And then when you run Ivy alone, like the offense is in the 22nd
It's
percentile or
bad.
whatever. Zach LaVine probably has a better chance of propping up those units, I think, at this
Yeah.
stage. Number 3, Cam Johnson. Is that controversial at all here?
It is for you because you thought it was Brandon Ingram. No, I think we have to do the Ingram versus Johnson discussion, right? It's just for Johnson is we've used the word scalable. This guy is like actually almost like definitionally scalable because he's mostly biggest value is catch and shoot player that's passable on defense at either forward spot. Like that's okay, cool. Like excellent role player, which means wide market. The salary is in a range that's not like, I don't think he's overpaid. And he's got a couple years at 2 years, 45.2 million left. If you're not watching, if you're just listening, I think it's still a discussion between him and Ingram just because Ingram is viewed as more of like a star, I guess. But to me, the cost, the plug and play status of Johnson's game, I think it just recommends him over Ingram, and you're not worried about like, are we just not going to be able to meet the demands for his next salary, next contract?
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. And the other thing that I do wonder though is, what do you view Cam Johnson as positionally? Like, do you consider him a wing, or is it, we just had this discussion during our mailbag, or is he a forward? Because I think with Brandon Ingram, you can consider him a wing, and maybe that would drive up his appeal. Whereas Cam, you mentioned he could be passable defensively, but he's not like a great rebounder. He's also not great defensively. And so, okay, on offense, he can be a 2-3-4, really, whatever you want him to be, but he can't be that defensively.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're just asking, I think, what position does he defend? And I think like he's definitely not someone you're comfortable with on the other team's best forward or best wing. So you're going to be hiding is too strong, but like you're definitely going to be looking for assignments for him that are not, like high volume shooters and scorers. I still think like maybe the question is, can you put him in a switching defense and just like be okay there? I think probably, I feel like the answer is yes. Like he's not going to be a difference maker, but I think people's opinions of Cam Johnson since he's been in Phoenix have been all over the map defensively. And you and I have definitely talked about he's just a 4 sometimes, right? Like that's just where he belongs. I guess I would say I don't feel worse about him defensively than I do about Ingram or LaVine. Like I think he's probably at least as good or probably better than either of those guys. So it is tough. Like he's not going to make your defense. I don't think he's going to break it either though.
I also think you mentioned this at the top. What inflates his ranking is how many teams will want him because the number so much. Like if you're going for LaVine or Ingram or Butler, it's more of a wholesale move where you're either like, it's not like you're trying to tip the scales ever so slightly in your favor with a finishing touch. If you're going for Butler, it's we need this guy if we want to contend or take that next step. Whereas Cam Johnson is viewed more as a cherry on top. And so more teams, he's just more accessible, and then more teams are going to be interested in him.
Do you think he's more likely to be traded than all 3 of the guys we just talked about for that reason?
Honestly, no.
Which is weird, right? Like,
right.
Why isn't this guy getting traded? Maybe it's just because Brooklyn says, we'll just try again next year. That's the other thing, right? Like Brooklyn it's probably going to be bad for 2 straight years. So they don't need to rush into well, we can't get a first for him, so we can just hold on to him.
And I think honestly, they can definitely get a first for him. But if you're not like now, I think you move him if you get the equivalent of what you think is 2 firsts or close to it, even if you're taking
Wow.
back bad money. And if that's not on the table, if you were going to get 1 first round pick for Cam Johnson right now, you can get 1 first round pick for Cam Johnson over the summer next season.
That's true.
Now we're finally on to number 4, which is Brandon Ingram. Oh, sorry, that was yours. You have
I was going to say, what's there
Ingram?
we've kind of covered it. Like we've talked about all the Ingram dimensions here. Question that to me is, can New Orleans get a first coming back? I think matching money is probably doable, but like, do you really trade him if you're getting matching money that comes off in like seconds? I mean, I don't know. Like you at least hold on to, you can sign and trade him if you don't like what you have now.
I would say if that's the offer for sure. I just don't. What are you gaining by squeezing him in free agency? You're still left with this player who might be on a deal that's what is the contract he signs that makes him a hotter trade commodity? And he's not a fit for what you're trying to build, or are you deciding, hey, like buy Zion and like Brandon Ingram and DeJounte Murray and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones of the future? And I don't even know if he makes sense in that type of a setup. I think they missed the window to get like a first round pick for Brandon Ingram. Had they made this decision a year ago or more, when they probably should have, it'd be easier. But I think that's what's also tough is we're trying to rank this. What's really inflating his value is his utility as an on-ball player. And it's also just like, this guy doesn't have we have proof of concept. Like, what teams have even been mentioned? The only team I've heard like tangibly, like through the ether and then actually reading, was the Jazz might have been in on him, but he didn't want to go to Utah. What other team has been just concretely linked as we want? Apparently the Nuggets, which just makes zero sense. But
well, I mean, I don't get. I mean, this is why we are where we are. Like, we've seen the problem with New Orleans holistically is like they just can't get everybody out there together for long stretches to see how good this team can be. And when they have, like, it's looked good in, well, I guess last year for a little while. But like, nobody feels great about him as a number 1. There's all these complications with him as a number 2 or number 3 because like the things he does well are just number 1 things. It's a little bit like DeRozan, except DeRozan's just better at like the self-generated 2-point jumpers type of thing. That's just like, I don't know what team is clamoring for that at the number that's higher than his $36 million a year right now, which is what you're probably going to have to do. I don't know. It's just, I feel like his market is suppressed for both like fair and unfair reasons. Like, part of it is just there's no teams with free agent money to spend next summer. So like the Pelicans are kind of like, okay, like who's gonna, if we can just hold on to this for as long as we want, maybe things turn around, maybe we can get back to where you're worth a first. But like, his game really is just hard to find a great fit for, right? For the price that it seems like it's going to take.
Yeah. And and what do you think he gets in his next deal? Do you think he's making as much money as he's making this season, which he is at, what is he, 30? He's at 33, right? So yeah, he's at 36.
36. Yeah. Is he? Well, it's like, what are comps out? That's the other thing. It's like, I was thinking like, okay, so what's Jeremy Grant getting? And he's like up over, what is he, 31? Is it more than that? I can't remember.
He's going to be up to 34 next season, whatever he's at now.
And like, that's a hard deal to trade now, right? Because Grant's older, but like theoretically, Grant brought more defense, more versatility, much more scalability. So like, is that a good comp? I don't know. I guess is the over under $30 million a year on Brandon Ingram's next deal? Where do you $29.5 million a year? Where do you go?
I'm going to just take the over because I feel like even when there's not markets, there ends up being markets. So I'm going to take the over, but I don't feel great about it, because I do think he's a really good player, but we're at a point now where if you can't be a number 1 option on a really good team and you're not built or wired to scale down or in different types of roles, I really do think it impacts your market value. And just, we're not going to bring up the restrictions all the time, but with how more complex the salary cap picture is for teams, I think that also hurts his value too.
Is it possible that we're not that far away from him being undervalued? Because like, he's not a bad player. It's just the fit's tricky, and he's not cheap because he can do a handful of things like most guys can't. I just wonder if whoever signs him, say he hits free agency, say there's no trade, whoever signs him, because again, the Nets have like 40 million. San Antonio can get there, but like there's not going to be a bidding war. He's not going to be a mid-level guy, but somebody is going to get him for, I agree, probably less 30 or less. And we might just end up talking about like, can you believe that the Pelicans couldn't get value for him? Look how good he is on Team X in 25, 26. Like that's not out of the realm of possibility to me.
No, I'm totally with you there. His situation is just so complex. And I don't know if it's hurt him that like I kind of thought a team would emerge. Maybe they had an injury. There's like, we need Brandon Ingram.
Yeah.
And that team hasn't happened. I've started wondering if the Heat moved Jimmy Butler, and not that they like the Pelicans should want Jimmy Butler, but as part of a 3 or 4 team construction where if you're moving Jimmy Butler and you're the Heat, we know you're not getting your picks back. And like you already have 2 out first round picks. Would you want Brandon Ingram back, as he'll probably be cheaper than Butler? He's younger. He's not a Butler facsimile. I want to be clear, but they are going to need someone else who could generate offense. And so would they be, if they know they're also not going to get, because at this rate, with Jimmy's age, his contract situation, and just the way that this is ending, unless it's like maybe there are 1 or 2 teams that'll give up a ton for Jimmy Butler, but I don't even know what Jimmy Butler gets you on the trade market right now. So you view Brandon Ingram, because then if it doesn't work out, oh, he's at least expiring. That's a situation I've kind of thought more about, but it's so bizarre that a player as good in a vacuum as Brandon Ingram, that I'm struggling so hard. It's almost like an extension of Julius Randle a lot of the time, but Brandon Ingram's fatal flaw feels so fixable. Where, dude, play off the ball better and take more catch and shoot threes.
Right. Dribble a little less. You can shoot as much as you want. Just make sure it's from behind the line like that. Yeah, right. I agree. Miami is always an interesting one because it's maybe an aged out assumption now, but it's easy to catch yourself thinking like, if he could just get there, they'll figure out how to get the best version of him. Because we've seen like, you can get the best out of Dion Waiters, you can get the best out of Brandon Ingram.
Number 5, I think is I had no clue where we were going to put this guy, but Zion is apparently available. I did find that, I don't know if you read the Steinlines report, that the only untouchable players in New Orleans are Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and Yves Missi, which is just, Yves Missi's having a great season, but I just found it funny that he was looped in to there. Zion's tricky because he's got 3 years and $126.5 million left on his deal. Those are non-guaranteed, but like we still don't necessarily know the exact criteria that you would be able just to wipe him off your books. And by the way, if that was the case, why would New Orleans trade him? They might just want that money off the books. And the other thing too is you're probably trading him. Is this the nadir of his value just because it's another injury?
Well, I think he's fascinating. Like, because the answer to, is it the nadir, depends on whether you view his like wipe off the books clause as a positive or like it's how do you view that? Because it is like you do get a do-over if you trade for him and it goes and it's like, oh, it's another hamstring on day 1 of training camp. He's going to be out another 6 months or whatever. Like you can just say like, we're good. Although I forget what the guarantee date is. I think it's July, in July for 25, 26. But I think you have similar non-guarantees going forward. Like that's such a weird thing to value in someone you're going to trade a lot for, though. It's like, well, if this goes bad, we can get out of it, but you've still given up the assets you did to get him. I don't know how to value him. He does, though. Doesn't he feel like the guy that if, I don't know what the team is, but someone goes 3 firsts, expiring salary for Zion, where at least in the back of your mind or in like the last paragraph of your analysis, you'd have to concede like they might have just traded for a top 10 player if he's healthy. Like, I mean, I don't know what the percentage chance that is. I think we're both kind of like out on the Zion experience, or at least I am. But that's a thing you can't say about Brandon Ingram or even Levine, and probably not Jimmy Butler. Like that's what makes him so interesting, is like a guy with his upside, minimal as the odds are he hits it, however minimal you think that is, like and like, what's he worth? I have no idea. So I think 5 is fair because the other guys we've already talked about are like, we have a rough idea of what they could get. With him, it's just, I don't know. He's just like, yes or no, is he going to get traded before this deadline?
I don't think he will. By the way, I'm looking at the guarantee things now. So 20% of next. So this is all, it's season by season. 20% of his deal next year, which is about $39.5 million. It becomes guaranteed at 20% if he passes all 6 weigh-ins this season. 40% becomes guaranteed if he plays in 41 games, 60% if he's in 51, 80% if he plays in 61. That ship looks like it sailed. And you were right. July 15th is like that's the guarantee date for it. So I guess the weigh-in must extend into the summer then at that point, if that's the guarantee
I
date
mean, if
for
he's
it.
not out there running, I don't think he's making that way in. But like the 41 games is probably out too, right? I mean, realistically.
Because it's him, yeah. There's still the 61 is just no. That's
Yeah.
as he hasn't missed 20 games yet, but he's going to miss 20 games. Like you would have penciled him in for fewer than that, like even
Right.
if he was healthy at the moment.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with him, and I could give you teams if you wanted to get into what teams or would actually pay this. I actually might be the most confident of anyone that's in front of him that he gets the equivalent of more than one first round pick other than Jimmy Butler. With Zach LaVine and Brandon Ingram, I'm not even sure you're getting a first. I'm like all in on Zach LaVine. I've traditionally been higher on him. I'm kind of a sucker for the guys that can catch and shoot and create and aren't like the Jordan Clarkson types.
Right.
But like, I don't think most teams, like we said it before, would you have to give up an asset to get off of Zach LaVine or whatever? I really do think that whether it's, if it's a Charlotte, if it's just like these teams that to get a hold of this guy, we'll give up a first round pick and then something else for him. I can guarantee you, I think there would be like a half a dozen teams at least that would be prepared to roll the dice on that.
And if you do trade for him, this might be, well, tell me what you think about that. Like, is a chance that I feel like he's the perfect guy for like the nothing to lose franchise. Like, yes, we'll give up a first. Like, why isn't Utah just like all over him? Because like, yeah, we can spare a pick or two. Even like, I guess you got to match the money, whatever. But like,
they could do that. John Collins is sitting at home.
And then what if like, okay, it goes bad. I do think you can turn around and trade him to somebody that really values wiping the money off, for something. So like your outlay, what you gave up, I think you can put sort of a pretty good cap on, or you could just dump him yourself, whatever. Like he should be on the top of every like middling to bad team that, like the risk is like pretty low, right? Like there's so many outs with him.
Now, if you were Brooklyn, would you give up one of your extra first round picks if they were willing, like the Ben Simmons plus if New Orleans? But I guess if New Orleans just wanted to get off, well, you're getting picks back in that equation, but to Cam Thomas and Ben Simmons for Zion Williams and like a first round pick for Zion, Brooklyn, they could probably protect some of those other picks that they have. He's not going to hurt your tank. He's not playing this season. So there you go.
Well, yeah, you could definitely, you could manage his minutes. You could sit him out. You could do all this stuff to like make sure he's not going to screw your tank up. If there's like a 5% chance that he can be an all NBA player again, that's probably, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think if you're one of those teams and you think there's a 5% chance, you should do it, because there's so many like pathways out of this being a disaster for you. Like waive him, trade him again, whatever. Like I think every bad team should be in on him. But I think all the arguments I'm making are just arguments for New Orleans to hold on to him and hope things get better, and you can trade him for a lot more if you want to.
I've seen this just in the ether. So very quickly, if you can get to the money, which you can, it'd be complicated framework, but you get to the money without including Andrew Wiggins. Would you want him on the Warriors? Are you willing to give up Kuminga and a pick for Zion Williamson or no?
I think I probably would. I mean, we'll talk about Kuminga at some point, but like, I mean, I think you have to think about what you're going to pay Kuminga. I think just the pure upside play, as long odds as it might be, I think you probably should just do that.
The names are about to get substantially less spicier. Do you want to take us to our number 6 guy?
This is Mr. Colin Sexton of the Utah Jazz, like the forgotten, like, evaluating Sexton has been really hard just because he's been on a bad team, but the efficiency numbers historically have been really good for him, especially even coming off that, really good Cavs season, missed the full following year. And we're all trying to figure out what he was going to get paid. He fits a lot of places as long as you don't need him to be, I would say, a starter, right? I think he's probably your 6 man, your volume scoring, offense first off / offense only lead guard against backups. I don't feel comfortable with him being anything more than that, but that's where we are on the big board at this point.
He's got 1 year and $19 million left on his contract too. And just as someone, he can hit catch and shoot threes, he can get going downhill. I don't have a problem with him as a starter, but he almost has to be he can't be your off guard because he's going to be too small. So then you need like this bigger lineup that just already has other playmakers. So like the Magic would probably be a perfect example of a team that could start Colin Sexton and just kill people,
Yeah.
especially when they're fully healthy. I mean, that would be like, that's one of the better destinations for him. But I like the scalability of what he does on offense. And if he's fine coming off the bench, you're going to bring him off the bench. I think that gets even better. I'm more concerned about, even if he's coming off the bench, I don't think he can be the driver of offense for other people.
No, he's the description I feel like you hear about him a lot is like he can dribble, so he can get it over half court and bring it up, but he's not going to be the guy that like perfectly navigates the pick and roll or like draws two and gets really gets the gears turning. He's just like a serviceable dribbler that in a half court set is not someone that's creating like buckets of offense for people.
Do you have any other teams that you like for him?
Well, as you're describing teams that can play weird lineups, I guess or can put size and defense at other positions to sort of and ball handling. The Dallas was honestly my first thought, but it's like you wouldn't play him with Irving. I don't think he would be a backup. I'm not where you are, where I feel great about him as a starter, even in like ideal circumstances. Orlando being maybe the exception to that. Like, I don't know. Would he have value in Houston just as like someone to generate points, and you can surround him with defenders who can also handle, and like Şengün makes sense because he can be a bit of more of an initiator.
Yes, but the problem with Houston is just like, so they don't need to give up real players to get him. You could give like a pick and you can get there with filler salary. But Reed Shepherd doesn't play a ton for this team. And so we're going to find minutes for Colin Sexton. I guess
and we refuse to believe it's because Reed Shepherd isn't great. It's other forces are at work. that's
right now, Colin Sexton is the better player. That's clear. So maybe he would have it. But even leave the rotation as it is. Is it so even if you eat up Reed Shepherd's entire minutes and you say, okay, have fun in the G League, and Cam Whitmore's entire minutes, you've now carved out like 15 minutes a game for Colin Sexton. Is that
not enough probably? Well, if you're
probably
going
to play.
What about the seconds and nothing, I guess, but yeah. Well, where else can we send him?
Detroit coming off the bench there.
Yeah, that works. Because he can also just be the spacing shooter if you want him to be too, which is what they seem to be after all the time.
Can the Clippers get? They're not going to want to give up a first round pick for him, and you really can't get him without giving up. They have nothing unless if Utah's really high on Terrence Mann and PJ Tucker, sign me up.
I don't know how you do this, but is he like? Could he just be what Minnesota thought DiVincenzo would be? Does he fit there?
How are they getting to the money?
They're not. That's what I was going to say. I don't know how you do this. Just trying to think of fits.
Yeah, that's where we're at that point in the big board where it's probably easier with some wings. I just think that Colin Sexton's value in a vacuum as like a utility of a player is more valuable than a lot of names we're going to talk about now. Number 7 on our big board. I struggled with this one because I would put him higher, but I recognize that I feel a type of way about Anthony Simons at number 7 that other people do not. 3-point percentage is down. He is still shooting. I think he's shooting a good enough clip on wide open threes. Just hit a game winner against Denver as well. And he's still super young. He has a year left on his deal at $27.7 million. That's the perfect amount of money to where it's neither backbreaking nor is it just throwaway money. And I think if you put him on a team where you don't need him to, not even that you don't need to have the ball in his hands as much, but like just better spacing, more threats around him so that defenses aren't as keyed in on him, I think he ends up shining. We've mentioned Orlando for him a ton of times. I would still mention Orlando. Throw him in Detroit. We're just going to keep mentioning Orlando and Detroit, but there are other teams that I think, I don't know that they'd be willing to give up the money, but you look at a team that's like built to insulate him because look at OKC. I'm not advocating for this, but they could get to this money. It's going to cost you Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins. You could also give up both. I don't know that I'd want to, but like this is someone that you can play heavier minutes because he has the marquee skill. Whereas with OKC, it feels like we don't trust Aaron Wiggins or Isaiah Joe to play these heavier minutes. And yes, he's a defensive liability for sure. OKC doesn't much have to concern themselves with that. They could be more worried about offensive consistency. That's not, if I'm them, I'm probably not doing that deal. I want to make that clear. But you talk about someone who I think is super scalable and just looking at his age and all the timelines he fits into, to me, Anthony Simons is among the, like, if I had my druthers, if I was just catering to all my biases here, I probably would have had him above Brandon Ingram. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh wow, I would have had him above Sexton, just because I just think he's got a high. I mean, we've seen him hit a higher ceiling as an offensive player before. He just happens to not be at it right now. He's unfortunately a case where Portland, I think maybe there was no deal there, but last year he would have been higher. Like he's just not shooting the ball or scoring at enough volume this
I
year.
think they're in a tricky spot too. They also, even when he's not making threes, they still need him
Right.
because
Well,
the makeup of
he
their
won him the
roster.
game again last night as we're recording this. So, I mean, but we should talk. What the hell happened on that last possession defensively for Denver?
We do not need to talk about that.
Okay.
Well, you leave Russell Westbrook on an island, you get what you got. I don't know.
You also get Jokic pointing at Murray to come double to get the ball out of his hands, and Murray not understanding what he meant, and then Jokic not even trying to contest at the rim. So we did talk about it. I think like that. So he's expiring next year. So you have if you trade for Simons, here's why I think maybe he belongs above Sexton. You have the opportunity to hope he like rebounds and is his last year version for the balance of this season. And then you also have next year, if you're just looking to flip him, if he doesn't prove himself worthy, you know what I mean? Like the extra year of control matters, even though his salary is higher than Sexton's. He's not like that much young. How old is Colin Sexton? Is it like
26?
So he's
They're
a year
the same
younger.
age, I think. Emery Simons actually might be older.
No, Simons is 25.
Okay.
So it's close. I still think the
So you would
perceived
rather
like
have
upside is
Sexton
higher.
19 next year, and Simons is at 27.7 next
Yeah.
year. You would prefer Simons over that? I think that's.
I think I
You
would.
got to talk me into it. I only put him at 7 because I thought you wouldn't be into it.
Yeah, I mean, they're fairly comparable, really, and it's just the extra year of control at a number that's like not so much higher than Sexton's annual rate that I'm like, maybe you could flip him. I don't know.
Off the threes too, Simons is going to hit more of those than Colin Sexton.
Yes, yeah, you can. Well, that's the other really. I mean, Simons, I think, can do more of the stuff we just said Sexton can't, which is like, yeah, you could get away with him running pick and rolls and like initiating the offense a little more probably, but he really is just a 2 that's kind of like undersized, I guess, and neither of them defends. So like, I don't know. I think it's close enough to where we don't need to quibble too much over it.
Who's number 8, Mr. Hughes?
Number 8. This is an interesting one. This is Bogdan Bogdanovic, who may or may not be available, but has been in trade discussions for 2+ years, on and off. He is, I mean, I think he's a better player than Simons and Sexton. Like I feel pretty comfortable saying that, but he's older. He's 32, I want to say. Also cheaper. So I guess we're kind of just seesawing back and forth there. 32, making 17 this year. Goes through 2027. So you have another 2 and 32 total left. I mean, he's someone that I don't think you start in most places, but he's just like one of the best reserve guards in the league that you can close with on the right nights, I think. So I think he should have like massive appeal. The Hawks are actually like pretty good though. And I don't know and he's on a value contract. I don't know what they're looking to get by trading him potentially.
And he's not, I mean, he's been injured a ton this season. He's a bigger injury risk. I know he played in 79 games last year, but I would say overall, he's a bigger injury risk than Sexton or Simons. And he's not having the most efficient season. He's still shooting 53.5% from 2, but he's below 35% from 3. And that's ticked up like with over his past like 6 or 7 performances. Like we've seen a little bit more of like the threes falling. He's arguably more valuable to Atlanta than ever because now Buffkin's out for the year. And it's just like, well, what are your reserve playmakers? You have Dyson Daniels and then you have Bogdanovic, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So I would wonder what type of offer it would take to even get him out of Atlanta, but he's a name that's bandied about the trade rumor mill. I would say even more than DeAndre Hunter at this point, whose name we did not include in this exercise. So I think you could make the case that in a vacuum, he's a better player than Sexton or Simons. And I would agree with you, but between the injury risk and the age, that's where, and also I think you could probably get those other guys while giving up 1 first-round pick. I'm wondering right now if Atlanta would accept anything less than like a first-round pick and something else.
Yeah, I don't know. Can I just say I really want him in Denver? I don't think it's doable with any level of confidence, but I just feel like he answers so many other questions.
Would you do? I'm just again, we're not factoring in there's aprons to figure out, but it's Larry Nance Jr. and it's Bogdanovic for Michael Porter Jr. I don't know why is Atlanta doing that, and if they're not, does including any first round swaps like a 2030 swap or a 2031. You can't give up, would we agree? You can't give up your 2031 pick. One would have to be conditional based off
Yeah.
prior obligations. But would you even consider giving up your 2030? I wouldn't. Attaching it to MPJ for that, I couldn't get there.
Yeah, I don't think so. I was going to say like Atlanta might need to be attaching a pick there, and what's Denver doing a deal that's getting it? I mean, I guess they need draft equity. I think I'd probably do that if I'm Atlanta. I don't know about the pick stuff, but yeah, I just like Bogdanovich, assuming health and assuming you don't care about like the back end here. He's just like he would just help. He would help anybody, and I think if you're a team that has second unit issues, and or you could throw Orlando in there too, is just need someone to make plays and be a reliable shooter. Like he's a universal fit, but the age and the injury stuff, I think obviously is I don't think you have him too low, is what I'm saying.
I do wonder. So let's just say Denver's 2031 pick is in play. And I think the fact that it's so loosely protected in all those other years that you can look at it as, okay, we're getting that pick.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get to Bogdanovich's money without giving up Michael Porter Jr., is there any appeal there for Atlanta where it's okay, we're taking back Flotsam and it's a bunch of Flotsam, so you're probably roping in some other teams to take back these smaller salaries. But between Saric and Zeke Naji, you get to 13.6 and Bogey's at what? He's at exactly 0.3. I mean, that's a pretty big gap to bridge. It's like another 4 million. Like, would you give up? So let's look at it from both sides. If you're Atlanta, and maybe that's the killer, if you could just get Denver's 2031 first round pick, would you do it? I mean, you also are probably getting one of their youngsters. So let's say Julian Strother and that 2031 first round pick. Are you doing that in a vacuum knowing that you're taking back, the Zeke Naji contract and Sarge has another year left on his deal? Is that enough or no?
Man, I don't know. It's not a fast no. I think if Kobe Buffkin had showed much or two stayed healthy this year, it might be a lot easier for Atlanta to say, yeah, whatever. Like how big of a factor is Bogdanovich in our future? Although like 2031, again, it's so far off. Like I don't know how each team would value a 2031 incoming.
Landry Fields feels like he's got some cachet out there and maybe some job stability.
I think I might. I don't know. What are you saying no if you're Atlanta?
No, I'm thinking about it, but I tend to over romanticize like those distant first round picks. It's just that this is basically, unless you're giving up someone other than Julian Strother, which I don't think you're going to give up, Christian Brown in this. And I doubt you're going to want to give up on Holmes, even with the Achilles injury. It would have to be a 4-for-1 because even the 3-for-1 structure we laid out.
So it's out. Nobody's doing 4-for-1s anymore.
And you could game it. So it's like, okay, if Hunter Tyson is in there too, you could take back, it could be 4-for-2. You would need a third team. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. You could do it is my point. Are you willing to trade Russ? You could just make Russ instead of Strother in that one, and then the money gets you there and you're fine. I don't know if Atlanta would do that then.
I think Russ is untouchable in Denver.
But like, I would do it if I'm Denver, though. Like, you would give up the 4, like, you'd give up Strother in your 2031 to get off, by the way, the Sarge and Naji money as well.
Yeah, that's a legit consideration at this point for them.
Just interesting exercise. He would be great in Denver, though. You are correct. Number 9, I think we're at is my turn. Sure. I'm Dorian Finney-Smith, just kind of the no-notes player who's been in trade rumors since he was acquired by Brooklyn. He has 1 year left on his deal. It's a player option. That's $15.4 million. He's going to be fascinating to see. My guess would be that he just declines it. And even if he doesn't, if he's only getting mid-level money, which is one close to that at this point, it's more years. He is, by and large, this year, shot the hell out of the ball. Mm-hmm. And he's still serviceable defensively. You talk about someone who fits everywhere. All of his premium skills aren't high enough to say he definitely needs to start. He's going to give you more value than a Sexton or a Simons or a Bogdanovich. But like, he just fits everywhere. And any team that needs a wing should just be trying to get him to the point where I've sort of wondered, my assumption was they're not going to get a first round pick without taking back bad money. But I'm just sort of wondering if you had an expiring contract that you're not using and you're a contender and you're willing to give up a first round, like it's a late first round pick. I think there might be teams that do that. But what are your thoughts there?
I think a first is, if I had to say yes or no, will they get a first for him? I would say no, just because of some of the factors you mentioned. Like, I do think he's going to opt out, and I do think there will be a pretty robust, like, bidding war at the mid-level for him. And so like, I guess maybe you have the advantage of if things went well after you traded for him, you might, all things being equal, be able to keep him at the mid-level or something like that. He is just like a stopgap though, like a really good one. I just don't know if you get first round, if you're from the Nets perspective, if you can expect or will get like a actual first round pick for someone that is going to a team that he's going to be their sixth or seventh best or most important player. Like
Yeah.
it's hard because like we agree. Oh my God, he fits. He's valuable. Like he's just the cap on like what he's going to give your team, I think is fairly low, even though it's like also pretty reliable and like you understand what you're getting with him. And for the right team, that's really valuable. So maybe if it's like they can't do this, but I'm just using the example of like, oh, Boston needs another wing. Yeah. And they have a first to give up. Like maybe that kind of first that's going to be number 30 from a team that knows it's going to be number 30. That's the kind of first you get. But again, not saying that is plausible or going to happen, but just that would be the only way I'd see Brooklyn getting a first for him.
And I mean, they could do this. I don't necessarily looking at their roster. I don't know. This isn't what I would say they need, but like Dallas could give up this year's first round pick plus salary for Dorian Finney-Smith. You would do that, right?
I think
Dwight
would,
Powell, salary X for Dorian Finney-Smith.
Right. I think so. Again, that's another first that's going to be 26, 27, something like that. So I shouldn't say it's a hard no, but I think you're not getting a first from a team that realistically that they expect that pick to be in the lottery or like in the, top 15 or 20 or anything.
Is he to this point the most confident the player that you're most confident is going to get traded from this list?
That's a good question.
I'm trying to guess if we go through the names that
I think probably.
Yeah. Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine, Cam Johnson, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Colin Sexton, Anthony Simons, and Bogdan Bogdanovic. Just how many of those players are there any ones that stand out and you say, I think they're going to get traded this season?
Yeah. I mean, you would say Butler because of all the smoke. But we've just discussed how difficult it will be to move him anywhere. So Finney-Smith, and from the Nets perspective, like, why would you have any confidence that you'll be able to bring him back, right? Or why you probably don't even want him back.
You have the space. You could, I'm sure you could pay him enough to come back, but why?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I think Finney-Smith might be our number one if we're ranking like trade likelihood at this point.
I honestly, of the list we have so far, and we should probably start delivering verdicts on these, I'm going to predict that Butler and LaVine get traded, and I would say everybody else does not so far.
Yeah, I think so. Although, like, I recently sold on the idea of Butler being traded just because when you read through like what has to happen and you start ruling teams out, like Phoenix is just like, if Bradley Beal says no, it's a no. Like that's it. Right. So
Right.
Like, I do think the Warriors are the one that makes the most sense, that could do it most easily. And that's a relative term. But the dearth of like actual possible landing spots for Butler makes it so hard to be confident. Of the biggest names, I think it's him. And I'd say LaVine, yes, because the Bulls just have to do it. And I think a lot of teams
don't burn that franchise. So I said this in our Discord.
I was just trying to
join our Discord. Like, we're at the point because like the Bulls won another game. Do you think it's possible that they're like making trades to actively get better this season? Isn't it? That's a remote. You would say no, and I would agree with you. But like now, it's sort of, that's in play.
Here, the real problem too is like circumstances being what they are, difficulty of trading for like peak value being what it is. If you're the Bulls, you could like with a straight face say to the fan base, we just, we didn't think it was the right time. The market just wasn't there. We're not in control of that. Like you could really like pass the buck again and not be, and almost get, I don't think they would get away with it. I think fans would be really upset, but they've been upset before and that hasn't affected the franchise's behavior. So I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit. Like they got to trade him.
Right. They have the 11th worst record in the league. So technically their pick is slated to go to San Antonio now. And you could say, might as well just get it over with. And because it's protected top 8 the next 2 years, you could also do just fucking keep that pick all 3 years because you're rebuilding properly. But that's a digression. I would say so far, at least 2 of the 9 players we've mentioned will get traded. I'll set the number at, I'd say 2. I'm going to say 3 and be optimistic and say Jimmy Butler gets moved as well. So I think 3 of the guys we mentioned will get moved.
That's about as high as I'd go at this point. Number
Who's at
10.
number 10?
Number 10, Robert Williams III. We have discussed him plenty. Certainly preseason when teams needed centers. Several still do. It's just like he's got 1 year left, 13.3 million. That's not breaking the bank for anybody. Oh man, does that fit into the mid-level trade exception? It's like
No, not. Well, next
it.
year it might. I'll have to double check that. It might.
Well, but I was thinking for this year. It's close,
Oh
but I
no, it
think
doesn't.
you're right. It does. Okay, it doesn't. Man, that if it did, we would have a very different discussion. I think the market would be a lot broader. It's just the health, right? Like, and I don't think you could trade for him expecting him to be a starting center that gives you more than like the obligatory starts and gives you 15 minutes a game. I don't think you can expect more than that. But he does, if he's healthy and can do a fraction of what he did when he was at his best, like he could make a difference for a lot of teams defensively.
Yeah, I'm with you. And he's a lot more dynamic on offense than a lot of these other bigs who can play similar roles. I would say the reason I have him so high is that there's an injury risk. You know he's going to play a few minutes. But at the beginning of the season, I would have assumed that you're probably not taking back great money and you'll get some seconds for him. Now I'm at the point where if you're not taking back great money, like if someone's sending in expiring money, maybe you're willing to accept a couple seconds. Although at this point, between him and Klingon, like if you view that as your center rotation of the future, why not? I do think you could get not a great first round pick for him, maybe depending on the contract you're taking back. I think you could get a first round pick for Robert Williams. Again, you're probably not taking back the best money in that scenario, but that's I understand why Portland doesn't want to move him, but if you're stuck with DeAndre Ayton through the end of his deal, then that's something that should be up for consideration, especially again, because of the injury risk.
I really don't think they're getting a first for him. I think if you couldn't get a first for Schroeder, like it's just I know that's like a funny thing to make fun of teams about, like, oh, he set the market. I just like Williams in terms of like the volume of contribution you can expect from him, it's pretty low. Maybe on the right team, it has such a high impact that it matters, but I don't know. I think the first is tough, just even like a bad one, because I don't know, of the guys on this list other than Zion, I guess, like who's more likely to just give you zero after you trade for him. I think you have to factor in the downside with Williams.
Do you think he gets moved?
I think so, because I don't know that Portland would view him as a guy that they want back. And like, I think, yeah, I think it's kind of the something or nothing. Which would you prefer if you're Portland for him? So I think he gets moved, and I think there's probably enough teams, assuming it's going to cost a second and whatever. Like I think he probably, I would say yes, but it's like you could also imagine teams just saying that's just not a reliable enough acquisition for us to give up anything.
What are we on? Number 11? Kyle Kuzma. This is interesting. We're going to get into Jeremy Grant of it all. And why haven't we seen Jeremy Grant yet? He's certainly more valuable on the court than Robert Williams, you would think. Kyle Kuzma, injured at the moment, still injured, hasn't had the most efficient season. There's definitely been maybe most nights where he's just been chucking. I still think he's someone who can scale down. I think that he's shown that he can do good things on defense for long stretches. And yes, I recognize that the Wizards, not so much this year, and I recognize the Wizards are dog shit on that end of the floor anyway. His contract is declining, is the other thing. So you're getting him for 2 more years at $40.8 million, and the number just gets progressively less from this season to the next, to that final year. And I do think that he is what I would call a combo forward. I don't know that maybe defensively you could view him as a wing at this point, but not so much offensively. What are your thoughts?
I think just to take the first one first, like positionally, I think if you view him as a wing because you think he can guard wings, that's like the speculative point of Kyle Kuzma now, because with Washington, his defense has been like, I don't know how you evaluate almost anything in Washington. So like, I do think it's fair to assume he could guard if he was on a team where it like mattered. And I think now, what that says about a player overall, where it's like, oh, he's on a shit team, so he's just mailing it in. Like, I don't love that, but I could forgive it a little bit. So I think defensively, certainly I'd feel okay with him on forwards, maybe wings if it's still there. Like, it's also possible it's just not there anymore. He's 29. Like, that's not an age where you would assume, like, he just can't
I always
move
forget.
anymore.
not that I forget how old he is, but he was older coming into the league. And so
Yeah.
it's like, oh, Kyle
But
Kuzma's going to be 30? Like,
but I don't think he's like, oh, athletically it's just not there. I think
and
that's
also
less
this runs
likely
through what,
than
his age 31 season?
yeah,
That's your time.
it's less likely that's the case than he's just like, I'm tuned out until you get me off of this team. I feel like, um,
Hey,
yeah,
he
I think
wants to be there. He reportedly turned down that trade to Dallas because Kyle Kuzma, despite not having star cachet or an actual no trade clause, has veto power. No.
yeah, he's an interesting guy. I mean, you could make the case he belongs higher if you believe because the contract's fine if he is like the best version of himself and that's still in there somewhere. It's just like I would be very there's so much uncertainty because of like the last couple years and like you just have to be really sure like why he's been bad. And
He's
I don't know
there.
how you know that.
There also is, I do view him as substantially more scalable than Ingram, but there is the Ingram of it all at play of it feels like he would be a fit on fewer teams that have the positional need he's supposed to fill. Because I guess, would you feel more confident giving up a first round pick for Kyle Kuzma or Dorian Finney-Smith? What's the player you would prefer to give up a first round pick for?
Oh man, neither. But I think probably Kuzma, because maybe he's this year's PJ Washington, where it's like he just comes in and he runs hot from three and he does guard, and oh, the defense is still there. I think that's just the first name that comes to mind. And you have that extra year that declines. That if things go really great, maybe you can extend him off that. Like that's another thing to think about. He's at an age where that might be something you factor in too.
I and this is I degraded him here because I don't have the fit. Because we
Well,
could say
that
that I think he would help a good amount of teams, but I'm not just like, oh, Atlanta needs to go out and get him, or Memphis should really take a hard look at him. Those are teams I think you could make an argument for. Memphis perhaps more so than
yeah.
Atlanta, but like there's no just obvious. Oh, okay, yeah, go do
Right.
that.
Well, here and the reason for that is like if you're talking to his agent ahead of a trade and as compared to Finney Smith, where you're not having the conversation of like, so what do you envision your role being, DFS? Like it's like, no, we understand exactly what you're supposed to do. With Kuzma, it's like we're gonna have to have a conversation about what we expect from you and does that align with what you want to do? Like that's a different conversation to have.
It would if they had any sort of equity to give up to grease the wheels of a trade. Kyle Kuzma might make some sense instead of Julius Randle in Minnesota.
Sure. I mean, just you get the extra year, you get the cheaper price point, and you get like I guess the idea of scalability, which Randall has zero of. So yeah, I think he makes more
It would
sense.
have to be Kuzma and Davis for Randall, but it's you can't attach another player if you're Minnesota and you have I don't even know if they have a swap at this point to give up, but they can't give up a swap in 2030 or a pick in 2031 because they already did.
Yeah.
So next up, this is yours. Who's number
This
12?
is Jeremy Grant, and this will feel overdue probably because in terms of player quality, even though the 2 point percentage is way down, he's 31. I think Grant is better than I don't know, just pick a number. The last 5, 6 guys we've talked about, just because of the theory of his scalability. This is a guy that has been a small ball center like eons ago, has been a first option on a bad Pistons team. There's different versions of him, I think, and not a great defender anymore, but still is someone that I think you would trust a lot more than certainly the smaller guards. We've talked about all this stuff. It just comes down to the salary for him. Like he's paid like a plus starter. And I just don't think that's really what he is anymore. I think like realistically, the production he would give you on a good team is not that far off from Dorian Finney-Smith, like with more self-creation, but like the price is just, it's hard to justify that for a lot of teams, I think. And that's why I don't think he's too low. I think people will say that because he's a good player, but the money just has to be a factor, right?
Yeah, I mean, 3 years, 102.6 million he's owed, and there's a player option on that last year, which anything could happen. But if he's opting out at that point, I honestly think it's because he's like renegotiating a longer deal at a lower number. I've seen a lot of Blazers fans and even media members over the past year plus think that Portland's going to get substantially more than a first round pick, or that it's going to be, I guess, like an incredible first round pick to get him. No, I just don't. If you're giving up more than that to get him, I don't like. What else are you including, or what else is Portland? Is it a combination deal where Robert Williams III is also headed out as part of it, and then it's a mega deal? But I'm curious as to just like what would they be willing to accept for him, because I do think that we predicted this, that contract wasn't going to age very well, and I think that he's still a good player now, but I think those out years, especially when he's shooting, what is he at, like 40% from three, that
38.
excuse me, from two, those out years are looking more precarious than ever.
Yeah, the free throw temp rate's down. Like all of the indicators of he's slowing down
There, and
athletically are there.
here's a stat for you, Grant. 158 players are averaging at least 5 2-point attempts per game. Jeremy Grant's 2-point percentage out of those 158 players ranks 156th.
Not great. Not great. From someone you need to be like an
And
athletic
by the
factor.
way, the only players below him are Jalen Noel and Emmanuel Quickly, who have combined to play in 11 games this season. So
Yeah.
just food for thought.
Again, if he were making the mid-level or something like it, and you were getting 38% three-point shooting, just enough defensive versatility to be a role guy, like, yes, he's way up there. It's just, who's the team that is a Jeremy? Maybe there are several teams that are a Jeremy Grant away from moving up a tier, but not at 33 million a year average, like annual value. That's just not that isn't a thing.
If you were like, what is there a case being made where if a team came calling where it's a couple of contracts and they're expiring money, or maybe there's a year left on one of them, but you're getting let's say you're splitting Jeremy Grant into two players. One of those players is an large expiring contract. The other one, middle of the ladder, maybe has another year left on it. And then you're getting a bunch of seconds. Should you be considering that offer? Or is it at that point, we might as well just keep them?
No, I think that, well, I think that is what you're looking at if you're Portland. I was going to ask you, like, what if it's just what if it's just dead money coming in? Would you just do that for like a couple seconds, and all you get is, you don't get like the mid-tier prospect guy or whatever. You get all that salary is gone, and in its place are guys that come off the books. And what a Schroeder got, essentially 2 seconds. You get 2 or 3 seconds. I think
I would do
that's
it.
kind of where it is.
I think if it's completely expiring, I would do it. If it's not, like, so the Lakers would be a good case study. Let's say they're able to pile together a bunch of, they have the Clippers second this year, and I think they have some other seconds they could give up. But it's like, okay, D'Angelo Russell plus what? You don't want, Gabe Vincent has another year left on his deal, but that money doesn't work. Like Jalen Hood-Schifino's expiring, so you could game it that way, but they can't give you purely expiring. So if you're accepting seconds, is your stipulation, well, we want purely expiring contracts? Because by the way, that's the other point of all this, is that when you're over 30 million, he's at 32 this year, I think, or maybe he's at 30 and he's at 32 next year. But like, that number is not an afterthought to get to. He's at 29.8 this year. So, I mean, so Gabe Vincent and D'Angelo Russell would work, but if you're not getting a first round pick, I don't think the Blazers would do that.
I don't know. I would say the Lakers should definitely do that, because that's just, what else are you doing? And you want to keep the powder dry from a first round pick perspective. But yeah, I think the Blazers, again, I mean, I can't remember.
Record, there would have to be like another minimum or something included, because that falls just short. But still, like, that's I don't know what team is coming in even and saying, like here are these expiring or close to expiring contracts. Will give you a bunch of, to be clear, he fits anywhere. And if the number was like 20, we're probably having a much different discussion.
Don't you think he's a good example of how the new CBA has changed things? We won't get too far. I know we don't want to talk about it, but like, I really think when the Blazers signed him to this deal, we talked about how, like, that's a lot, but I think that's probably tradable for like neutral or somewhat positive value. And I think that would have been true if not for the new rules. I think like he's like not someone you cite that often as like, see what's happening here. You talk about like Phoenix, and you talk about the Heat with Butler and stuff as representative of the difficulties that are present now that weren't before. I think in the old CBA environment, this would be a different conversation. I think the market would be broader. I think Portland could expect to get more for him, but it's just, nobody wants anything that's like over a certain threshold that's not like a clear value, like a superstar or a clear value deal. I think that's just changed.
And I think it's more complex in the sense that he's at a price point, and this always would have been the case. It just would have been easier to move him, where now you're talking about, do we need to send out 3 players to make the money work?
Right.
And like, rather than 2. So if it was just 2 for 1, I think that opens up a bunch of different permutations. But because there are some teams where and this factors in the new salary rules, but like the Lakers are a perfect example. We came up with $28 million in money, but nope, that's not going to work because they were like $500,000 under the second apron or whatever it is.
Well,
So,
and because of that, the team that's giving up multiple players has to be like, oh, do we have enough left to fill out a roster? Because we're going to be hard capped somewhere if we're aggregating, basically.
Or you get into a point where, especially with Portland, all right, roster spots are an issue. Who are they waiving? So no, we need to rope in third and fourth teams. Now those teams need to be compensated for. Like Detroit is probably going to facilitate like 3 or 4 deals by the deadline.
Detroit is the team I am most confident will be involved in trades. Like there's just no way stuff gets done without Detroit as the third team on like almost any high level deal we're talking about.
We are on to number 13. Your guy,
oh boy,
Jonathan Kuminga, which I think is an interesting inclusion. And we need to have the discussion of, I want to know what he's worth, but we first need to ask the question. He's mentioned in these packages where if they're going to go after Jimmy Butler, or maybe if they're going to go after a big name, are you trading him independent of a blockbuster? Because if you say no, he might not belong on this list. Now, he's on this list because I feel pretty strongly that they should be, with him approaching restricted free agency specifically. It'd be different if he still had another year left on his deal, but he doesn't. Yeah. I strongly believe that if there's a team that wants to roll the dice on Jonathan Kuminga, you're not necessarily getting any better, but now you've gotten an asset and you don't have to pay Jonathan Kuminga $25+ million a year or whatever it ends up being. I'm probably making that deal if I'm Golden State.
Yeah, I think that short answer, yes. You are looking hard at trading him if it's not in a Jimmy Butler or whatever deal. And if you are looking at Jimmy Butler, then you're also looking at trading him. I think it's just like they were too far apart on extension negotiations, right? The reporting was he wanted about 35 a year, or starting at 35. The Warriors wanted 30, not close enough. He has not shown anything this season to make the Warriors side of that negotiation like go up. Right? Like he hasn't done anything this year to indicate that a leap has been taken or that, oh no, okay, yeah, I wish we'd signed him. I wish we just said yes at 35. Like the opposite is true, I think. I think he has not performed well as a starter. All of the biggest issues with his game persist. He's far enough into his career now where it's like, you don't just get to cite his age and say upside is there. And specifically from the war, like that's not to say 3 years from now, he might not be what he thinks he can be, but the Warriors timeline doesn't care about 3 years from now. And coupled with probably what we should have led with, like you're going to lose him. I think like you're going to lose him in free agency. And if you do get him back, it might be at a low number because the market wasn't what he thought it would be. Okay. And he's kind of upset and is the same guy anyway. So I don't know that that's a win if you get him back at 25 a year or 20 a year, because you're just looking to trade him anyway to a market that just told you exactly what he's worth through restricted free agency. Yeah. So I think you probably do just need to be looking at moving him full stop, right? Like all of there, I don't understand the justification for keeping him unless it's just, we're okay with bringing him back at whatever restricted free agency says he's worth and chancing that he's cool with it and everything works out like from a team dynamic perspective.
Is there any team that, again, independent of this blockbuster, if you're dealing with Golden State and you're trading them Jimmy Butler, says, yeah, we'll take Jonathan Kuminga, why not? As part of like the salary matching coming in. Is there any team that, because he is still tantalizing, like the on-ball stuff on offense, independent of the playmaking, it's still like, I see it. And I'm not a Jonathan, like I'm not super high on him, but also at the same time, it's like his efficiency on drives is down. His efficiency on dunks has plunged this year. And I look at a team and it's like, what is the team? They're presumably, they could be good. They could be bad. That's his salary structure. That's maybe you think they could help him. But I look at him as a one position player. And if you consider him a wing or a combo forward, or maybe a combo big, if you really think that he can upsize, sure. I struggle to find that, again, the talent, like the raw talent is undeniable. Like the physical tools are there. And we've seen, like, in ways you've been able to, people said the same thing about James Wiseman. Like there have been extended stretches, like what Jonathan Kuminga did to close last year. I also am struggling though to find the team where it's, there'll be teams that will give up whatever just to take on, but like a team that would value him and say, hey, here's something.
I think there's maybe like two kinds of teams that make sense for him. It's the nothing. What he doesn't. What I wouldn't feel good about is him going somewhere where he has to play a role on a good team, because like we're looking at that and that's just not the fit at the moment. I think on the high end, like a Miami, where it's like we're not hard resetting, but we're going to buy low and rehab somebody and like figure out how to get the best out of them. We've mentioned them already as a team that does that, or the nothing to lose teams like a Brooklyn, where it's just, you want to explore the space. You want to get a full season of 28% usage and all the shots you can get and all the on-ball reps just to see what happens. Like worst / best case, we're terrible and like we get another high pick, or you develop into what your ceiling might be. Great. Like I think those are the, like, there's two ends of the spectrum, I think. But in both cases, I do think like if you're getting him, you need to know he doesn't want to be Gerald Wallace, like, which is like, I know that's a 20-year-old reference basically at this point, but it's just like the best athlete on the floor that plays incredibly hard, and you don't run plays for him, and he just bangs around and dominates games in ways that have nothing to do with on-ball ISO creation stuff. Like, he doesn't want that, even if that might be what he's best suited for. So you need to go in with eyes open, like on that front. So if you believe he can be a lead offensive piece or like a major offensive piece of a team, and you're willing to trust that and not need him to be like a good driver of offense as a passer or a good defender, go for it. Like that's you just need to know what you're getting at this point.
I'm only mentioning this team because they were mentioned, I think, before the season started or right as the season started. But I'm going to frame it this way, and maybe this applies to other teams, but you're getting a first-round pick. It's this team's own first-round pick, but it's not guaranteed to convey because of whatever the protections are on it. Philly might be a team where they're bad right now, but if they're protecting their own pick, they're inoculated against disaster, and they're thinking, no, we're eventually going to send Golden State the 21st pick in the draft, or maybe even something worse. Is that a deal Golden State needs to consider at this? But you're getting expiring money and a pick that is only really going to convey if it's like,
yeah,
I think maybe outside the lottery.
I think maybe at this point, and from that is a Philly type acquisition, because if you're concerned about a player that like, or you're interested in talking about, I shouldn't say Philly type, like more of a Morey type acquisition. It's like, you know, if Jonathan Kuminga hits, like our championship equity goes up 1.9%. Like that's really that makes sense on that end of it too. It doesn't feel bleak if that's what the Warriors get for him at this point. It's maybe realistic, but that's kind of a bummer.
I understand why they wouldn't do that, to be clear. Mm-hmm. I'm not even advocating for it. I honestly don't know, because it's okay. If the alternative is paying him a bunch of money in restricted free agency, I probably prefer the pick. But now you're saying, now could we squeeze him? Because no team gave out an offer sheet in restricted free agency this year. What team is doing it next year? Maybe Brooklyn would, but then you wonder, are you going to let him walk for nothing or match a deal you don't want on your books? Or as you mentioned at the top, is he just unhappy? And then what does that do for his, now you have him on a deal that's less than what you would have paid him last offseason, but he's not any more tradable because he's not playing well or doesn't fit in. I think you probably, if it's only a top, if you're only getting like the number 16 pick, let's just say, if you're the Warriors, you probably have to wait, right? Like, it's just, no, we'll keep Kuminga and play this out.
Guess, yeah. And we should have led with this, but I can't, my opinion, like a disclaimer, we should like just pre-record, like, my opinion cannot be trusted on all Warriors transactional pertaining to the Golden State. Please do not act on or repeat to your friends anything I say about the Warriors.
I think the Dunked On guys proposed, it was Kevon Looney and Jonathan Kuminga for Miles Turner. And they wondered if Indiana would have to send something else out in return. So I'm wondering if I'm too low on, because I heard that. I was like, I know Miles Turner's not having a good year, but no.
Well, not sending anything else out. Okay, see, again, please refer to disclaimer. Why isn't Indiana doing that? Like, why Indiana should do that?
Who's their center? Thomas Bryant?
Kevon Looney.
Oh, right. Okay. Sure. I mean, why not?
Multiple time NBA champion Kevon Looney. Like, that's who your center is. I will say,
if someone's going to hurt a defense that's 29th against top 20 offenses, I have faith that Jonathan Kuminga could do it.
Yeah, right. Oh, we got to move on. I'm getting emotional.
Number 14, John Collins. Oh, sorry, this was yours. Do you want to say
number 14, Grant? John Collins. Value rehab a little bit. This has been a roller coaster of a value situation for John Collins over the last several years. The big news is, I think it was Tony Jones who was talking about this. he can play the 4 now because he's shooting it well enough, and defensively he's shown some mobility. So it's not like he's a 5 only and can't play the 5 either, like as a defender, really. So I think his value is a little higher than it has been. I'm not saying he belongs any higher than this though, just because he's still like really an offense first, like not truly 4, not truly 5. That makes a decent enough chunk of money, but it's a short-term deal. So he feels like someone that's, man, I wish he made like 5 million less, and then it'd be like, oh, he's getting traded for sure.
27 or close to almost 26 or
Yeah,
25,
it's just
6.6 this year. But he only Grant, it feels like he just signed that extension. He's a player option for next year at 26.7. So there's a chance that you're looking at an expiring contract. I would guess that you're not, but it's so short term that it's no, I'm not giving up a first round pick to get him, but you actually could probably use him as a mechanism to get a first round pick, right? Because there are worse contracts out there.
What's he get on the market if he opts out? I don't know that that's a given. Is he like, so just
a mid-level guy, which is 14.1, right? Or no?
So he just turned 27 a couple months ago. I mean, the 44% from 3 is not a real thing. He's 36 for his career, not high volume. Is he like a better Bobby Portis? Like, is that, I mean, I don't know that Bobby Portis's contract is the right comp because the Bucks kind of like, we got to keep him type of thing. He might get more than the mid-level. Maybe, I don't know. If I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of if you're trading for him, are you doing it with an eye toward like, he's a piece we're going to keep in the rotation via a new contract going forward? And depending on that number, you might make a case that he belongs higher, but like, I don't know.
If you're Utah, the two kind of constructs I thought about are you taking back 2 contracts plus seconds? Like Kevin Huerter, Trey Lyles, and seconds for John Collins. Or, I mean, he'd be really interesting on the Lakers. I know he's not a center, but to play next to AD. Now, do you give up D'Angelo Russell's expiring? So Utah could say, sure. So D'Angelo Russell plus salary X, get whether it's Gabe Vincent, it could be Jared Vanderbilt at this point, but then it's, well, now we're just really like, we have no guards. It's, well, you have guards, but we don't have anyone who's going to handle the ball aside from LeBron, and we'll run it through AD. But like, that's the type of framework, is those types of deals plus seconds. Or if you're Utah, you're just holding, you're bad enough, you have enough extra draft equity.
Man, now as you're talking, you just saying the Lakers. If you're the Lakers, would you rather trade what it costs for John Collins or trade what it costs for Jeremy Grant? And then
I'm assuming I'd rather trade what it costs for John, because you have to figure their first round pick they're giving up is in 2029 or later.
Yeah,
you're not giving that up for John Collins. So it's John Collins for me. The contract is shorter, not as good of a fit on defense, can't handle the ball as much on offense, but he's more. He's probably about as plug and play. But you could try. You're not playing defense anyway. You could try playing him at center when AD's not on the court.
You at least have like a, I don't know, like a potentially fun offensive dynamic with him there. That's like, then he needs to be higher. I get, but like that's a pretty unique situation. I think in a vacuum, people might still care more about Jeremy Grant even with that money. He's an interesting player. Although, like, check in with us next year when John Collins' value is like God knows where, because it just can't stay the same year to year.
Another interesting player here, Vooch at number 15, which feels high because there's no way. I would want to know what contract Chicago's taking back that they got a first round pick for Vooch. He is having the most efficient season of his career, pretty much. A year and 21.5 million left on it. If he's going to shoot threes at a clip that is, or hit his threes, I should say, at a clip that is this high,
48%.
Right. You want him. But like, even if he comes down to 40, that's acceptable, right, Grant? 40%.
I mean, I guess it's fine.
He's also shooting 64.5% on twos. And so I think you have to view this through a little, like, at least a bunch of smoke and mirrors, maybe. But Vooch has more value than he did this time last year, because his contract is shorter. He's playing better. I just don't know where to put him, because the Lakers are another team that's an example. I would trade D'Angelo Russell in seconds for him straight up. But that's like, expiring money in seconds feels like your cap on a Vooch trade.
I would agree with that. I think it's a rental. There's no chance.
The Bulls won't make the trade then. They're going to keep him and try and win, correct?
Yeah, I mean, God damn it. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I hate it.
Are there any teams aside from the Lakers that you would, I thought about the Spurs. No, maybe.
I mean, any team that's willing to play Zach Collins next to Wemby should be thinking about Vooch. Yeah, I mean, like, again, if the Pelicans were doing anything, it would have made sense there. Just anywhere you're talking about, because what he is now is any place that used to target Kelly Olynyk, I think, minus the passing, is like, we'll take a guy that can space and shoot and score fairly efficiently that we probably can't close with. And it's a weird subset of teams. I don't know that contenders have any use for him in like a major role, certainly not as a closer. So like if that's the role you have him in, then yeah, like I it's pretty narrow. Who needs spacing?
What about the Dubs?
Yeah, just as a shooter, I think like Draymond has, by the way, slipped defensively, but like having someone there next to him to clean up the mess, I think would be useful. I mean, what about Orlando? Can he go back?
And then at some point they'll play Paolo and Franz Wagner and Vooch and Jonathan Isaac. It'll be all centers.
Just as a backup where you have to have Isaac or like Goga out there with him. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of places that.
Why don't we just will they take Mitchell Robinson and Precious Achua and then another small contract? We'll put him on the Knicks with Karl-Anthony Towns and see what happens to the defense.
How fun would that be? Look, think of the space, Dan.
But it's another where I think he's been really good, but I think there are a limited number of teams that even with his market being low, would necessarily trade. Like, would Charlotte just take a look at him as like, oh, we're not really sure how many minutes Mark Williams can play when healthy, but they also have Nick Richards there, so who knows?
Yeah, I don't hate that. I'm trying to think. Miami, no. I'm just thinking like, Bam
Miami apparently wants a 5 to play next
Bam
to Bam
at the 4 makes sense as a defender. Like Miami was not going to do that. I think what did you say? Like basically just seconds. Like you're never getting a first. You're never getting a contract.
No deal that spans beyond next year is probably.
I think that's right.
The cap there. We're into the latter half, which is going to go a lot quicker than the first half. Who's number 16, Grant? Well, I'm going to spend 25 minutes on this.
I was going to say, you for sure. This is Ayo Dosunmu. Fits anywhere. What's he make? 7 this year? Does he have one more year left?
Yep.
We've already talked like maybe you could extend him. Probably. I don't know. It's hard to say. We'll see what the market looks like. Not going to be a star on either end. Probably not going to start for you, but I do think he's someone that you could probably, because the price is so low, you could get an asset of like future value. I think probably not firsts, probably talking seconds. And then that's kind of an argument for not trading him, I guess. But we're still very much of the mind that the Bulls should consider trading virtually everybody except for Modest Buzelis.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many teams I would love him on, but I don't think I don't think his standalone value is a first round pick. And that might be where the problem is. But what also is problematic is that he makes so little that you can't necessarily up his, I guess if you attach him to another player, but you can't necessarily up his value by saying, we'll take back a bad contract and then give us a first round pick that way. And it's just, who would you attach him to make that like, because if you were the Bucks aren't going to, he would be great on the Bucks, but they're not going to give up their only tradable first round pick off into the distance for him. And so I struggled to find that team. And if I'm the Bulls, this is the one player where it's all right. If they offers 2 seconds and expiring money, I'll probably just hold on to Ayo Dosunmu.
Yeah, I think so. I think broken record. Last year was probably the time to do it because he was shooting 40% from 3 last year. You had just a longer runway as the Bulls to hey, you get him for 2+, 2 years going forward.
Do you think it's again, it'd have to be a smaller salary plus Precious plus that fake? It's not fake. I mean, it could convey, but that Washington first, is that a deal that Chicago would consider?
I'd take a fake first. Even if it's like a dubious fake first, if I'm Chicago, that's better than a real second.
I think let's call it a dubious first because it might not be a first, but it's a dubious first.
It's like a 1.5.
He would go there, although we could just name every single team in the league. Could basically, I mean, Atlanta, he'd be super interesting on if you think he could give you some backup point guard reps there. By the way, his defensive scalability is the thing for me, where it's, oh look, Ayo's guarding a 4, and it's okay. So he'd fit a lot of places, but the fact that if it's a bigger deal, maybe that's the pathway to it's Ayo Dosunmu plus. I mean, Zach LaVine makes so much money, but is it Ayo Dosunmu plus Vooch Plus, we take back a really bad contract and get a first that way. I don't know. Number 17 is what I find to be one of the more underrated players on this list, Mr. Clint Capella. He's a year left on he's going to be a free agent, excuse me.
Right.
And we know, I saw the reporting, I think it was from Jake Fisher, that Atlanta prefers to move him. And they haven't given any real hint that like they don't want to play him though. So that's just a weird thing. Opponents are shooting under 55% against him at the rim. He can still rebound. He's limited offensively, but he's helping anchor what's been a pretty good defense in Atlanta. If they want to move him, you're not getting a first. But like, if they want to move him, they're assuming they'll take back seconds. I think there are a bunch of teams then that should be like, even if he doesn't fit what you want to do, if you just get to expirings, if you're the Warriors, expirings in seconds, insofar as you have any left, like that's a team that should be looking at it. I still find him to be very underrated. I'm not saying he'll command a ton. He's number 17 out of 30, but I'm just surprised that I'm looking at Atlanta. Like, I know you have Onyeka, but it's all right. So you want to play who at the 5 moving forward? Onyeka and who? We haven't seen Onyeka play 30 plus minutes. It seems like you almost need to have sort of a co-opt. He's also small. Clint Capella is not that small.
Yeah, I think Capella has been better this year, just basically across the board. Like this time last year, I think it was like, oh my God, what are they gonna have to pay to get off of him? He's just like, he's limited, right? Like he's not. You want him to catch lobs and you want him to block, defend the rim, and he's like doing that right now. It's kind of the Vucevic thing. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not, because couldn't you imagine Capella being the starting center in like a I don't know, in like a Gafford / Lively's different because he's so mobile. But like, if Daniel Gafford can play major minutes for a team that makes the finals, like, couldn't Capella? Like, how different are they really? I guess, it's
like, why I know that the spacing could get walking, but like, why aren't the Lakers, if they really want to slide AD down in certain lineups, the Lakers, D'Angelo Russell, that Hawks need a backup point guard. Again, I don't know what's happening in your offense in LA. Figure it out later. But that plus needs to be another salary and a second. If like, how, I'm just curious. He's starting for Atlanta. Like, what is, and you want to move him. So what are you accepting for him?
I think you're accepting. You just need to know you're not getting a first. You're not getting a young asset. I think it's money in seconds, and he makes 22, almost 23 million this year. So it's the Vucevic thing where it's like, what? It's just I don't know. I think between Vucevic and Capella, and I guess Collins is a little different. It's like these guys might just stay where they are and hit free agency, which was like unheard of in the past, where all these guys would always get traded on these expiring situations. But I just think circumstances are different now, because if you're the Hawks, can you realistically expect to get something back that is like, oh, we want that thing, and then also we're not taking on long-term money?
Right.
I don't know.
They're not going to want to take on long-term money. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's tough. He's a good player though. Like, he's a mid-tier starting center.
Who's more likely to get traded, John Collins, Nikola Vucevic, or Clint Capella?
I think it might be Collins, which sounds weird because he's got the highest salary. But I can imagine him being
Utah's most determined to be bad.
What's that?
Utah's, of those teams, is most determined to be bad.
That is true too. Yeah, the Bulls and Hawks. The Hawks. I don't know what the Hawks are trying to do, but I'm interested in the Hawks going right now. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think of those three?
I think it's Vooch, just because with the Jazz, I know that they're probably less married to all of their players than anyone else, but I also just like, why are you trading John Collins you're not getting a first. So if you're getting a first, it's different, but you have all these other picks already. Why are you trading? And you're also bad enough. In Chicago's case, if you want to get bad enough, you probably need to move Vooch at this point.
Yeah. Are we also at the point of the big board where it's like, presumably these guys are all more likely than not to not be traded?
Let's see. Who's number 18?
One Malcolm Brogdon, the Washington Wizards point guard.
He was injured to start the year, and at $22.5 million, that's just a tough number to move.
Is that expiring? That is, right?
Yeah. It's expiring at 22.5. So there are teams where he'd make a lot of sense. Could we try and trade him to the Clippers again? But how are you are you rolling the dice on giving up Mann and PJ Tucker for Malcolm Brogdon? I think Washington does that, to be honest, with the Clippers.
Yeah, I think Washington would do that. It's just with him, he hasn't been great, but he's still a guy you can trust to hit threes. Like, the locker room presence is a real thing, I guess, and maybe that matters for maybe that broadens his appeal, so to where it's not just contenders that need a third guard type of thing. The health, though, from a contender's perspective, like you just can't. 39 games last year, 36 2 years ago, has basically been, I don't know what the average is, but there's a lot of 50s and 60s and 40s in his games played totals. So that might hurt it from a contender's perspective. You just can't trust him to stay healthy. I do think
He's like the Robert Williams of point guards.
a little bit like, oh yeah, he will help if he's on the floor. Like we're
Yeah.
confident of that. It's just the role can't be that big, but then you can't be confident of the health. I think you have him positioned about right here, just because I think
How about
Washington might value keeping him because
we are
he's the adult
collective?
in the room.
I'm gonna interrupt. It's a we. Don't make it look like you didn't have. I gave you input on this.
Yeah, sorry. I did have input. No, we have him about right. But what do you think about that? What about, like, we haven't had a lot of guys, or really any, as I'm looking back at the list, where you could say his bad team might just be okay with him hitting free agency because he's like the new Garrett Temple, where we just want him here
Ooh,
for the
you think he's gonna go
mentorship
back to
thing.
Washington though? You're saying you just want him here for the rest of the
For the
year. You're
rest of
not
the
thinking
year,
about.
because it's only getting
Okay.
uglier, probably, or it's going to stay as ugly, and you might just need someone to keep things from, turning to Lord of the Flies.
I just Washington relative to other rebuilding teams, they might have a good prospect well, but their future pick stash isn't great. That if you can get some seconds in there, I'm gonna move him.
I think so. I'm just wondering if that's just a factor. I think from that's not hasn't been
Yeah,
discussed for a lot of these veterans so far.
I still think Orlando just needs to go out and get him.
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
That's your placeholder. We want them to make a bigger trade. They won't do it. That's fine.
Hmm.
He would be interesting with the Clippers though, if you think he's healthy. I just don't. Man plus Tucker feels a little rich, and I don't see the Wizards being like, well, okay, well, here are some set. I just don't see them doing that.
I think the Lakers too. If it's like you can have Gabe Vincent and that salary's tough, because I don't know if you might like him more than Russell, for example, just because you can trust him.
So Russell and Shafino and a second for Brogdon, you'd feel better about the Lakers after that trade.
And Washington should do that, I think, because you're getting a pick and you're not taking on money, and yeah, I don't know. There it is. We did it. Brogdon to the Lakers.
What if it was? Well, no, because Russell plus Gabe Vincent's $30 million. So you do Vincent, and no, it'd be too much. Yeah, that would
That's the
have to
thing.
be.
It has to be Russell, and then it's kind of like, I don't know. Like Brogdon's not a good defender anymore. So, or not that he ever was great, but I don't
Are
know
you
what
trying to say that D'Angelo Russell is a good defender?
No, I know. I'm saying, like, what are the gains? Because offensively, they're not that different in terms of bottom line production.
This is a controversial one at 19, I think. I put Cam Thomas here. He's going to be a restricted free agent. Did not agree to an extension with the Nets, in case you didn't know that. Injured as we record this still. Dude can be a bucket. I think he's improved as a three-point shooter a great deal. There has been incremental improvement as a passer, but because he's not a good passer to begin with, I don't know how much that means. I don't know how when he's on a smaller contract, so you're not taking back bad money if you're Brooklyn, you're not getting back. No one's giving you a first for Cam Thomas. Maybe there's like a bigger deal because his salary is so small. You attach him to Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith and get, honestly, now I'm thinking about it, if you wanted someone who could dribble more in Dallas, like you could get to the money if you're giving up the first round pick for Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Thomas. But if Spencer Dinwiddie's playing so well, you probably don't see the need for having Cam Thomas. But like that would be the framework to getting a first for Cam Thomas. I think he has value. I'm probably a little bit higher on him than you are.
Yeah.
He's so tough because he makes so little, headed for restricted free agency. And I think it's more likely, I'll frame it this way, that you get a first round pick for Jonathan Kuminga than you would for Cam Thomas.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I think too, like for Thomas, he hasn't really made anything money. He's made a lot of buckets. He hasn't made money yet. And so restricted free agency, you should assume if you're his acquiring team, like you're going to have to just pay whatever the highest number that's how offer sheets work, obviously. But like, he's going to take the biggest deal. It's not like I would imagine, because he hasn't made like life-changing NBA money yet. So like that's a factor to consider. And yeah, like it's weird. Like if it's a team that views him as a building block for some reason, it's like, well, that's a lateral move. And so what are they giving up to the Nets? And if it's a winning team, like Thomas just hasn't proved he can be a piece of a winning, like the bucket getting player type is a weird fit in a lot of places. It's just like the market is I don't know, not exactly like teaming for him, I don't think. So that drives the price down
I
too.
also don't have a great destination for him. I mean, I'll say like the Clippers taking a flyer on him would make sense, but I have no idea what I might consider giving up Terrence Mann for him, but now it's other money coming out of Brooklyn for that, and is Brooklyn
Oh,
taking that? They might. I don't know, but
you know who, to be consistent, since I said Denver should just go, Denver needs like a Lou Williams from 2007. Like,
they have nothing. Like, do you want Hunter Tyson plus Dario Saric?
yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe you want Hunter Tyson's longer contract. Yeah. I just like,
Would
if
you,
I'm gonna,
although, because Brooklyn's the type of front office that would game it this way. If you were getting off of Saric or Zeke Naji as part of this, would you give up a swap as
oh,
Denver
then
to
you're,
get
well,
Thomas?
I don't know, maybe because this is the guy that like maybe you just don't lose this non-Jokic minutes as badly because he's out there creating shots by himself. Like I don't know. I just, this is the player type that I think might be within Denver's budget to like address the non-Jokic minutes without screwing up the starting five with a big trade. So like maybe you would throw a swap out there.
Would you? So it would have to be, who else is on the Nets
You
that makes
keep
a
them.
little
You keep the matching rights in restricted free agency, so
right?
you are in control of if you keep him or not. That's got to have value to a team as inflexible as Denver is.
Honestly, though, Denver could use Day'Ron Sharp too, and you could do Zeke Naji for Day'Ron Sharp and Cam Thomas if you gave up 2 swaps. Is that too much? I think
Wow, that
Brooklyn
feels
does
like
it.
too much. That's like we're talking
One
for
swap's not getting it done for those 2.
probably not. I that's fascinating.
So if it would have to, because also that's like the only structure. No, you would shake Milton. All right, so you could do just because Watford's too valuable. I mean, you even have Keon Johnson. So it won't be Jalen Wilson. He's too good. It'd be Cam Thomas and then basically not Noah Clowney or Day'Ron Sharp or Trendon Watford. So let's say Shake Milton, just as like the kind of throwaway. Shake Milton.
I really wanted Day'Ron Sharp in this deal. I'm too.
Well, you won't do 2 swaps.
Yeah.
I don't think Denver would either because they have Holmes. I know he tore his Achilles, but I'm assuming there's a plan for like they want him there moving forward. So it's Cam Thomas and a small salary for a swap from like a 2030 swap, but you have to take back Zeke Naji's money. Do you take the flyer on that just looking at Denver's future?
I think I might. If I thought like, and I don't know.
If
what do
Denver
you think about,
doesn't do that, because I think there's a stronger case to be made that they should have to give up the second swap because you're getting off Zeke Naji's money. So if it was Day'Ron Sharp and Cam Thomas and 2 swaps, I'd do it in a heartbeat. If it's 2 swaps for Cam Thomas, I don't know.
Yeah. What about the general idea, and we got to move on after this, but like the thought that just go get a microwave scorer to run second units without Jokic, like is he someone that could actually do that effectively enough to be worth giving up a swap for?
Yes.
Because you're not closing with him. Like, I don't think ever. But he has a very specific use for that team.
Don't say that. Jamal Murray has been prone to missing time.
So you don't want to close with him is what I should say.
I mean, is that the goal of what Denver should be doing, is finding someone that they want to close with? It like their starting 5 is, I'm fine with it. You have Peyton Watson to pull that.
No, I know. I'm just saying, normally if you're giving up a first round asset, even if it's a swap, you're not just going with, we need a guy to play 17 minutes a game without our best player on the floor.
So when Cam Thomas went down, the Brooklyn Nets were 8th in half court offensive rating, and he made their overall offense better by 5.2 points per 100 possessions, and their half court offense better by 5.9 points per 100 possessions. So I'm going to say yes, that I think he can give you. I don't know. I don't think you're going to win the non-Jokic minutes, but I think that he could help float in offense. I think it would get easier to game lineups without Jokic to have some sort of an identity that's not just like defensively skewed.
Yeah. And really, like, now that I'm talking about it more, is it the worst thing to have like just a pure go get your own to play with Jokic? It's not like Jokic wants to be. I don't know. It might kind of work.
And how many minutes is he spending with Jokic too? Is the other
not
thing.
a lot. Not a lot. Okay, Denver should do it. Both swaps, do it.
But if you're Brooklyn, do you do the 2 swaps for Day'Ron Sharp and Cam Thomas for Zeke Naji, or is that not enough?
I think I'd probably do it.
I think I'd probably do it too. I'm going to short the shit out of Denver just based off what some of the decisions that they've made so far. But It's questionable. Let us know if we're just off our rails and it's not like both sides would do it. I find that interesting though. Next up, who do we have, Mr. Hughes?
This is Mr. Keldon Johnson. Kind of like someone still that it's always weird to me that the Spurs just, he doesn't feel like he's a highly valued piece there, even though when he signed that contract, which has 2 years and 35 million left, we were like, it's good money for Keldon Johnson. I think that's going to age well. Doesn't seem like it. Averaging 12 a game this year, hasn't started anymore. That ship sailed last year, basically under 30% from three. Still just, he's age 25 season, like has had flashes of being a good corner 3-point shooter, good enough athlete, plays physically. Like, it's just, I think he's in the right spot just because I don't view him as someone teams will say, well, that's nothing close. Like, we're not giving up. We want Keldon Johnson. We'll give up a first, or we'll give up like, it just doesn't feel like he's all that likely to be traded, because I think the Spurs can handle a contract that's a little inflated, and I don't see teams like knocking the door down for him.
Yeah, I would just be curious because they have the way that Julian Champagne's played, Devin Vassell is back, and if you are still invested in Jeremy Sohan, like how committed are you to him being long term? I would be curious to see what teams would give up for him, but I think that you mentioned the word is flashes. Like they've always been maybe some extended flickers and flashes, but it's never sort of maintained. And I think the big swing skill that's never developed fully for him is you don't look at him and say, I know this guy will knock down threes.
Yeah.
He's just not there. He's at 37%, I think, on wide open threes this year, which is just not good enough. So,
and really, we're talking about 1 year of that 21-22 when he hit 39% of his threes. That's just clearly the outlier at this point. And also, he averaged 22 a game 2 years ago. He's got to be, if you wanted a list of like the most, like, no way, he averaged 22 a game players, he's way up there on it. But it's just been that he's kind of had a Jaren Jackson-y career where like one skill shows up and then it goes away, and another one shows up the following year and that goes away. And not really, none of them have showed up this year, which is why he is where he is.
Number 20, moving on towards the end, we have Mr. Jordan Clarkson. I don't know how to feel about him. I'm not going to lie. He's not my favorite archetype of player. I thought last year he showed way more as a playmaker than we've kind of seen. Efficiency's been all over the place this season. But if you're looking for someone who, I mean, this is another name that'll be mentioned for a Denver team or any squad that's looking to just, hey, can we float some offense here? He's got 1 year, $14.3 million left on his contract. That aligns almost perfectly, by the way, with next year's mid-level exception, which is at $14.1 million. I think you could probably envision him being more efficient on a team where he's not going to see as much defensive attention. But just like it is concerning that, all right, this dude is 32. He's at 47.7% from two, 31.6% from three, which is actually higher than last year. He to me is he's probably better. Maybe I'm not crediting his playmaking enough, but this is like the quintessential off guard who's not going to give you enough on defense and maybe might not be efficient enough on offense to do what you want him to do.
Yeah, I think the quietly the 6 man of the year contention stuff is like 3 full seasons ago. And so for a player like that, I do think you're right that on a better team, I think he just has more utility with more talent around him, more players to draw defensive attention away from him and what he does well, which is get his own stuff. It's just, yeah, he's second maybe. Like I feel like in terms of a return package at this point.
Next up, we have, this was tough for me, Kevin Huerter. If he didn't have the shoulder injury, because he's 1 year and 18 million left in his contract, and I apologize for hijacking your guy, I'll let you take the next one. I would probably value him way more than other people do, but he's dealing with like repeated shoulder stuff now. And so that's a concern. He started the year like gangbusters, including on defense, faded off. They changed his role, started getting efficient again, then gets hurt. So that has to be the concern here. But to me, there's a case to be made that he belongs higher than 22.
Yeah, no, there's a case to be made just because the level he's hit, if you assume it's injury, and if you assume that injury is something he can get past, that's driven down production over the last couple of years, like it's not that, well, I guess maybe like his first year with the Kings and really the last couple with the Hawks, where it was, he's a great movement shooter, but also like you can run pick and rolls with him. And this is age 26 season. So like, I do think you would be justified as a team that thought it is injury. He can't get past it. He's valuable enough for like real, like a couple seconds or like a fake first or whatever. It just like, it's scary though, because he is like a guy that is really offense mostly / offense only, and he's just not shooting it well. And so it could be like a zero value guy. But the upside is there if you can talk your way around like the reason, or if you can talk yourself into the decline being the shoulder that he's, like, give it another year and he's back to being what he was.
What I also struggle with too is that he seems like the money that Kings would want to attach something to as part of a bigger deal. Do you think if someone came calling at this point, let's just say the Raptors have some expirings where it's like Bruce Brown for Kevin Herter, basically, are you considering doing that if you're Sacramento? I mean, Bruce Brown might actually help them. So even if it's Kelly Olynyk and Chris Boucher, is that type of a deal you're considering where it's, oh, we're getting out from under that final year of his contract, or do you view it as, no, we'd rather take the swing on what he could do, plus we want tradable salary moving forward, rather than can we sign Bruce Brown to a deal where he still has trade value?
I kind of think Sacramento is such an interesting case because and I think you probably lean this way, and I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, they need a big upgrade, like a star. So, but I also think like the lineups they use most work. And if you could if you could do a 2-for-1 and you get two guys back that can be in your rotation for Herter, whatever the longer term money situation is, like, that kind of makes sense for what they need. So what was your Boucher and Olynyk or something? Like, I think you could make the argument that just makes the Kings better because they just need, especially big guys, that they just need bodies that they can put out there. That, like, Isaac Jones has played real minutes for the Kings this year, and that's just like, that was
Kobe
not
Jones too. The Joneses.
So I think if you could turn Herter into two end of the rotation guys, I think you probably should do that.
I do feel like there are also just teams that if your offense isn't good, it's like he will get the 3-pointers up. And so
Sure.
taking a flyer on him would make sense. He's also still young enough to where, let's just say if New Orleans really wanted him, I don't know why Sacramento's going to come take CJ McCollum off your hands. Now, do they want Zion or Ingram? But like that, like you could talk, the scope of teams that could be interested in actually getting him and using him, I think, is probably wider than some of the other players on this list.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
You want to take? Oh, speaking, we already mentioned this guy, but you want to take him since I stole Kevin Herter from you.
This is everybody's favorite north of the border cowboy, Bruce Brown. Kind of like forgotten this year and has been discussed a lot as a trade candidate. He will be a unrestricted free agent after the season. The idea of Bruce Brown still has a lot of fits everywhere. I just, I think maybe that Denver season is doing a lot of the lifting, and it's harder to gauge his true value at this point. Maybe I do think going into free agency for him, it might be less of a deterrent than it is for other players, because I think he would just be like a rental type, right? I think that's how teams would view him, as like you're our 8th guy now, and we trust that maybe you can get back to what you were in your best years a couple of years ago. Like, I don't think Toronto is getting like an asset that it's like coveting for him. Well, it's just kind of some swapping out money, maybe.
I don't know what he's going to look like after the knee surgery. We haven't seen him yet this season, but like if you knew he was going to play and we had an idea of what he looked like, he's still kind of this good connector on both ends. I think the real value with him, which is why he could maybe even be higher, is you might get a 1st-round pick, if only because his expiring money is so big. Like there's a lot of different scenarios it opens up if teams are looking to get off of money.
What's his salary this year? Is it like 21?
I think it's 22 and a half. No, that was Malcolm Brogdon. He's at 23.
Okay, 20. Yeah, maybe if you take back bad money, that would be the way to frame it. Ideally, from Toronto's perspective, is we'll take like 3. I don't know who's the guy that's making that number or more for a couple more years. Like, just trade him Jeremy Grant, and we'll take picks or something. Portland's too bad to be giving up picks, obviously, but. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it for the Raptors.
Checking in at number 24. Didn't know what to do with him. Lonzo Ball. It's fun to see him play basketball again. Can still be a fun passer. And he's had some moments on defense. Just taking a flyer on someone who is, I don't know how many minutes. He's like kind of in the realm of a Jonathan Isaac or even a Robert Williams, where is he just going to be on a minutes cap the rest of his career? Could be. He's coming back from basically unprecedented surgery. But he's 27, 21.4 million. Again, we could get into the Bruce Brown discussion of, do you get a 1st-round pick for taking back bad money? I'd give up 2 seconds just to take a flyer on Lonzo Ball, have his bird rights, and see if he can help my team. That's someone who might be able to help your team at both ends of the floor.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I think the most likely and an ideal scenario from the Bulls' perspective is we'll take your bad money with if we can get a first
For
for
sure.
it. Um,
If
I
you were Houston, you wouldn't be like, "Hey, here are 2 of our, like, big men that are making like a Jock Landale and Jeff Green, and we'll just give you a second to for Lonzo." You wouldn't even consider that?
I would be confident if I was Houston that I could sell him in free agency on like of the minimum offers available to you. Here's why we make the most sense, as opposed to giving up
Okay,
seconds. Probably.
that's fair.
Yeah, I think I could give up a second, or if you're Charlotte and you're like we are committed to Lamelo, let's get Lonzo in here. We would give up something for that just to have him be the better than Thanasis, but the Thanasis force in our organization.
What about him? Well, no, they have enough guards. Let's just move on. No, so do you even I would take the flyer on Lonzo. I'm there. Who we got next, Mr. Hughes?
We have Larry Nance Jr., who I think is like, oh yeah, he's on the Hawks. He's like, isn't he the budget answer to like a lot of teams? Like, God, we just need a guy we can play at the 5 for 10 minutes that can give us stuff on both ends. I feel like he should have broader appeal than he does, but I think he's kind of being viewed more as like salary to throw in than anything else at this point. Like, what do the Hawks realistically hope they can get for him? And is
Two,
like, are we?
a second, 2 seconds would be the max, I would think.
I think it's like one, and like what's it? He's expiring, right?
Yeah, he's expiring at like 11 million,
It's
I
11
think.
something. Yeah, I don't. I think you could get a second, and that'd be about it, probably.
I might consider giving up 2 seconds for him. I'm not gonna lie. He's an injury risk, but you're gonna have his bird rights. He's appeared in 11 games this season, but he's shooting 60% on 3-point attempts per game. That's not bad. I would give up 2 seconds for Larry Nance Jr. I think you're selling him a little short here.
All right, deal. Where's he going?
The Warriors.
Per-
Number 26, we have, I don't know what to do with him. D'Angelo
uh,
Russell. Like his value to me still is more so rooted in the fact that he's this expiring contract and you could do some creative things with him. Like if you're a team looking to get off money, or even if you're just a seller, let's just even say you're the Heat and you're trading Jimmy Butler to the Lakers, that there's this $18.7 million expiring salary coming back in who will also be able to play for you upon arrival. That's where his value is. I don't think I would be curious if the Lakers would just trade him. So, like, if there was a team where it's kind of like we even mentioned it with the John Collins, the fact that because you don't have a ton of other playmakers on the team, would you consider something like if you're the Lakers to move him like that, or you're only moving him as part of a larger deal?
I think it's most likely he's part of a larger deal because I don't know what the sense would be in trading him singularly. Like, what's coming back in that?
Give me
In
2
that,
seconds to trade in future. If I'm not thinking about any long-term money, what is I know you don't own your pick this season, but what is this season? If you're getting a player you're going to use, like if it's for John Collins, I'm giving up D'Angelo Russell and I'll figure out what the offense looks like later. And it's not like D'Angelo Russell's a starter for them
That's
anymore.
true.
So,
Yeah, and I think like if Collins being the example, that's someone that maybe you can trade for more for the following season potentially. But yeah, like it's an offense only player that's not playing offense well anymore. So like I don't know what you do with him. He could be better on another team. I think it's got to be. I want to make the D'Angelo Russell case for 30 seconds, which is just to say like he signed that last contract knowing like you're here to be traded, and to play for 2 years on under those
and not
circumstances has
get
got to
traded.
suck. Not fun. Would not want that.
Who we got at number 27?
This is CJ McCollum, who if we're just talking about ability is like I don't know 20 spots too low maybe or something in the neighborhood there, but it's just 30 plus million this year, 30 plus next year. Is at an age where it's like he ain't getting better and the defense isn't there. So I just I don't know if the Pelicans could have traded him for anything of value, that would have happened by now, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know. They seem like divorced from reality at times. So maybe, but if you're getting back expiring money in a second, you're trading CJ
Done.
McCollum.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he's really good. It's the money that this is why he's
Yeah.
so low. Well, I shouldn't say really good. He hasn't looked necessarily great this year, but I think that he can, like, he is someone I think you could acquire and he might play for you during the postseason, and that matters.
Yeah, if he were making 15 million, you'd have him like you'd definitely want him over the Clarksons and Sextons and maybe even Simons of the world. But that's just it's a little bit of the Jeremy Grant thing in here too.
Coming in at number 28, we have Cody Martin. Of course, it's Cody Martin. We're at the point where he hasn't necessarily been rumored, but we know he'd be moved.
Mhm.
That's just someone who he's shouldered a lot of difficult assignments this year defensively. He's shouldered a lot of defensive assignments defensively, Grant. How's that for some verbiage?
On his shoulders, he shouldered them.
He's versatile and effective when he's healthy on defense. The best way for me to phrase it. He could be a connective passer on offense. He can get going downhill when he's hitting his threes, which this year he's been up and down again from there. But I think if you can tee him up for wide open looks, he's at least someone where you say, okay, like he could probably shoot like 36 or 37% on those looks specifically. And what is he shooting on wide open threes this year? He's at 35.6%. So look, I was close. I would absolutely, I think he can help a playoff rotation. I think teams that need any sort of like kind of wing or perimeter defender in particular should be looking at him. His salary for next season is $8.7 million and it's non-guaranteed, and it doesn't guarantee until June 30th. I think if you're Charlotte, you could probably get 2 seconds for him at this point, and I would just take it. I think, look, we know how most of the people in our Discord feel about Cody Martin, but I'd probably have him higher up on this list.
He has a small but vocal following, at cult level following. Also, like on the twin theory, if you've seen Caleb Martin be a really good player in a postseason series, you should just assume that Cody could do it if he got there.
Yeah, that's how that works, right?
Yeah.
Number 29, Grant, who is it?
Jonas Valanciunas signed to be traded. That was the only thing anyone ever said when he ended up in Washington. He's got 2 more years and $20 million total left on his deal. Lakers make a lot of sense if you just need a big body so AD can play the 4. Still is someone you can just throw it into, and he's going to be a physical post presence. He's going to take up space. He's not a good defensive player, really, but just I think kind of just a safe, like exactly what you're getting with him. And that has some utility. I think he still is just like you're not getting firsts, you're not getting young players. It's just, well, if you can take back, and certainly from Washington's perspective, like we will take back your bad money with a second, 2 seconds, whatever. I think he's if we're talking about likelihood of being traded, he's way, way, way up there, just because that's been the plan all along. I assumed maybe we've gone too far with that, but I don't think Washington had anything but plans to be like, you can be Alex Sarr's like security blanket for a minute, and then we're just going to trade you.
Look, LeBron took less in part because the Lakers wanted to get someone like Jonas Valanciunas, so now they might be able to get him on the trade market. That's exactly how that. I did find it funny that that you've made some pretty bad decisions at backup center, that the Nuggets, when they were looking for offensive juice, and it was like all these perimeter players and mostly guards, and then Jonas Valanciunas is mentioned in that Athletic report. I found that funny. Our final player coming in at number 30 on our big board is the one, the only Mr. Chris Boucher, who we know is eminently available, but Grant, just as someone who's like kind of this undersized big and will get threes up, isn't always going to make them, and that kind of includes making them this season. He's not shooting well from 3, so I won't even cite it, but I think he's at an okay percentage on wide open threes. He's at 39.5% on wide open threes. Take it. On an expiring contract, someone just give up a second round pick for him. I think he boosts. He could play either big man spot in a pinch, even though he's clearly like more of a 4. So he's kind of like, what if Larry Nance Jr. played without a conscience? Is like basically what he is. And I love him. I think he could be super useful. Even as just again, how do you make the money work? But if you get Toronto to take off Gabe Vincent's money, that'd be something I'd be looking at if I'm the Lakers, because he could play next to AD. I think that's something that could work. And I think there are other teams that could, like if Denver had anyone, I mean, they could get to the money with Zeke Naji and Dario Saric, but what are you giving Toronto to get Chris Boucher there? I think he fits on a bunch of teams actually, and I'm being serious.
Oh no, I don't. I think if he's going to be a spacer that can block a shot, still blocks threes. He shoots and blocks threes. Those are Chris Boucher's chief skills.
Or attempts to block threes. So like he's always done. He takes threes, he attempts threes, and he attempts to block threes, and it doesn't always pan out well. But it's going to happen at least.
He just understands the math of the modern NBA. That he just does those two things. We're going to suppress opponent threes, and we're going to increase our 3-point volume. I think it's appropriate that he rounds out this list. I respect our inclusion of him.
We'll leave the big board up of our top 30 names. Are there any, just very quickly, names you want to roll through that we considered?
I mean, the list gets pretty long. Like, I don't know, for various reasons, DeAndre Ayton is someone that's just like, what is he doing in Portland that like should be traded? I think maybe the most interesting one to me is Julius Randle. We could have thought about, because if you view the Wolves trade with the Knicks as a financial move, part of the appeal of that is Julius Randle is someone that you're not married to, that may come off the books, that you can move.
Do you think he
For like,
declines that player option, by the way?
I don't know what to do with anybody's player options because of how little cap space there is. I think if I so that really that's a
He's
question
at
of what's
30.9, by the way.
what's
That's
his
the number.
market value? Can he get 3 years, or let's say can he get 2 years, like a 1+1 at 50 million? Maybe.
Maybe from the Wolves. No one with cap space is giving him that money, though, right?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, because Brooklyn, like, what interest does Brooklyn have in him? Does he might just pick it up. I think maybe what's going to happen is a lot of guys are going to pick up options, and all this, like, the Butler stuff is bluffing.
Maybe, yeah, that could be the route. Or it's, does he decline it and the Wolves are bringing him back at maybe 20 million a year, and it's like, or you could do 1 for 30 and roll the dice if you're Julius Randle, or you could decline it and get 3 for 60 from the Wolves.
I think I don't know, man. It's so hard to guess, like, what teams' appetites for that kind of money is going to be going forward. I think I might take the security. I might take the 3 for 60.
Maybe I'm jaded from last summer, but I'm taking the security if I'm
Yeah.
Julius Randle.
Yeah, I don't know. But doesn't it seem equally likely that guys like him just pick it up? I'll go for unrestricted free agency next year, and then I only need to sign 2 for 30 or whatever to equal what I would have got. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I could just imagine saying to yourself, "Oh, it'll be better down the road. It won't be so congested and like penny pinching forever."
With that, though, Mr. Hughes, you ready to take us out of here?
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Dan. Remember, if you haven't already, please rate, review, subscribe, thumbs up, everything. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe there, leave some comments on the YouTube videos. Join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Tell your friends about the podcast. Tell your enemies about it. And as always, we shout out Frank Ntilikina, and we apologize to Jared Allen.